Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Comic Source Comic Boom collaboration. Time to talk about the comics for the week of September 6th, 2022. DC Spotlight. Rocky and I are here to break them down into great detail. So, as always, spoilers. Don't forget, if you haven't read these DC books and want to read them without spoilers, probably go read them first and come back and check us out. So, I thought it was a really great week. I do sort of wish that Flashpoint Beyond and Dark Crisis came out in different weeks, because they're always books I really look forward to, and they haven't let me down yet. Maybe Dark Crisis started off a little slow for me, but I feel like it's hitting its stride. And yeah, I thought they were both pretty solid this week. Got the cover of Flashpoint Beyond right there. It reminds me, I have these from a few years ago. I have these poker.
Oh, the
chips.
Wayne Casino chips. Yes.
Casino. Yeah, I have like 5 or 6 of them. And I saw that cover. That's a Mitch Garrett's cover. I saw that cover and it reminded me that I wish I had more of these. Like, I wish I had enough to make a whole set to actually play poker with. So I jumped on eBay today. I was like, I wonder if there's any for sale. Couldn't find a single one. There are some action figures that come with one chip, but yeah, they were pretty hard to get even the year that they handed them out, 2011 at San Diego. And I was only there like one day that year. So, but I've got, 5 or 6 of them. They're cool to have. But anyway, what did you think of the week? You sounded like before we started recording, you felt like it wasn't as good as it could have been.
Well, I thought Dark Crisis issue 4 of 7 we'll be reviewing. I thought Dark Crisis was a little bit of a lull for me, but it's clear that it still feels like setup. It still feels like there's things are being set up, and it's already issue 4 of 7 already. So I kind of wish it was a little bit faster paced, but it's clearly building to something. I like Flashpoint Beyond. I've been enjoying that. And there's some good ones here. Shazam, I'm really enjoying. A Mary Marvelous Shazam, which and even Nubia was actually, while it's Nubia always has had some issues, and I've had some problems with the Wonder Woman mythology overall, the Wonder Woman titles, but Nubia at least has a story that I think has an ending and is building toward its own mythology, which is interesting. Batman, I thought was great, was really good this week. Sardaski's Batman continues to impress me, and even like a sort of like a Super Sons or Super Kids story for Dark Knights of Steel. So so it's going to be interesting to hear your thoughts on all of it too.
Yeah, Dark Knights of Steel for me was kind of a strange one in a way. But yeah, we'll get there. But let's kick it off with Batman Beyond Neo Year. This is the final issue number 6. Although to skip to the punchline, it does say at the very end of the story, Batman Beyond will return in 2023. So whether that's with Colin Kelly and Jackson Lansing writing it, I sort of think it will be. I have absolutely I haven't talked to Colin. I haven't talked to Jackson, although they will be on the show later this week on the Comic Source podcast, talk about their upcoming series from IDW, Star Trek. And then probably not that episode, but I'll probably do a separate episode with them maybe in a few weeks or a month or so, talking about their DC work, their Marvel work. They're writing the Captain America series, the one that stars Steve Rogers, and I had a lengthy discussion with them about Captain America at San Diego Comic-Con. So yeah, we'll touch on it. We'll touch on Batman Beyond. We'll touch on Captain America, but mostly the episode coming up this week will be about Star Trek, unless they take it in a different direction. But then, yeah, look for another return visit in a few weeks with more detail. But I have a feeling, and the reason that I say that I think it'll be them is just based on this story, based on what we got, and how this really is sort of a new direction for Batman Beyond ever since the older Bruce Wayne has been killed by Gotham City itself. They've really established some good supporting characters here and kind of a new direction for Batman Beyond. I never have been that interested in Batman Beyond previously. I haven't read a ton of it, so it's hard for me to say whether this works better or not. But what I will say is, like, I am now reading it, so that's got to count for something, right?
Yeah.
as opposed to, I mean, part of the reason I never read Batman Beyond was it always felt a little two dimensional to me with the Joker's gang and, Bruce still being there as a mentor to Terry. And it felt very much like a cartoon, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it lacks a little bit of sophistication in my mind. Again, there's nothing wrong with pulling from animation. Certainly, Batman the Animated Series, it won awards. It's revered as bringing so many people into the Batman mythos and its kind of gothic style. And Kevin Conroy and Bruce Timm and Paul Dini and all those guys that were involved, household names, and tons of credit for introducing a new version of Batman, a more serious version of Batman, even though it was a cartoon, to a whole new generation of comic book readers, of Batman fans. So, I'm not discounting animation at all, but what I'm
Yeah.
saying is, a lot of times you can't be that sophisticated or that complicated because you have a half-hour show. You lose maybe a third of that for commercials. You got 20 minutes. You want to keep it simple, and so I don't think, at least again, I haven't read anything. I know they've added other things in. There was even a female Batman Beyond at one point, that in the Dan Jurgens run, but I just haven't read that stuff, so I can't speak to it. But what I can say is this run was really, really great. I loved the character of Lumos that they created as almost like a Lex Luthor type villain in terms of being really smart, very affluent, and just like Luthor has become in Superman comics, not 100% evil. Maybe he's leaned more back that way, but we certainly saw him as a hero in Action Comics Rebirth. And this Lumos guy, he's pretty bad, but yet the enemy of my enemy is my friend, I guess, is what we get a little bit here. And even at the end, after they've stopped Gotham City, its plans to sort of enslave the population, you've got Lumos there chasing the money. He does everything out of greed. He said so himself, but he's actually helping the city because he can charge a ridiculous sum of money to go in and find this hidden malware that's in all the municipal systems. So I like that going forward, it seems like he's still going to be part of it. This detective, Beam, kind of a love interest for Terry. I enjoy her being Boonma.
Yeah.
Uh,
Heck of a
yeah,
name.
yeah. I still can't get used to saying it. So that's great. Seeing the older Barbara Gordon is great. I thought the artwork, kind of interesting. So I thought the artwork was really solid. But one thing that I'll say about the artwork here from Max Dunbar, it kind of reminded me more of Bernard Chang's art that
Yeah.
was in the most recent version than previously. I felt like his figure work here was a little more angular than it's been. Maybe it's just a product of having Terry in the armor, and he made the armor look kind of angular, especially with the wings. They have points on them and whatnot. So maybe that's what it was that made me feel like that. But the art is really strong. The color work's really strong. I enjoyed this. It feels like a complete story. Like, maybe they didn't know, maybe Jackson and Colin didn't know if they were going to get to tell more. So they did give a satisfying story here. But if they're bringing it back, especially with these two, then it must have sold well enough. So I thought it was great. And that double page spread when Lumos first he agrees, hey, I want power. I want to have control over people. I'm willing to work with Gotham City, and then Gotham starts infecting him and kind of corrupts him with this hard light looking armor. And man, that double page or that full page splash I thought was amazing. So all in all, this was very satisfying. It's not an exaggeration to say this is the best Batman Beyond arc I've ever read, because it's the only Batman Beyond arc that I've ever read. But I really enjoyed it, and I thought it was well done. If I could nitpick about anything, I don't necessarily feel like I got a lot of characterization for Terry McGinnis, other than he's kind of tenacious like Bruce, right? Like he never gave up, even though the odds looked long for quite a while. But that's sort of superficial. I was just talking about keeping things simple. So I do hope if Jackson Lansing and Colin Kelly are the writers that continue this run of Batman Beyond, that they kind of expand on that in their next go round. expand on the characterization of Terry, because I know he's not as simple as he's portrayed here. I mean, I think previously the most Batman Beyond thing I'd read is I think he was in the weekly, was it New 52 Futures End? I think he was in that.
Yeah.
But that's been so long ago, I don't even really remember his characterization there, to be honest, other than, generic hero guy. But all in all, I did enjoy this. What did you think?
I agree with you. I'm not. I've never been a big Batman Beyond fan, but this was to be one of the reasons why I've never been a big fan is that it always feels Batman Beyond just feels every story I've ever read of Batman Beyond. It's never had an ending. It always feels like he's always fighting a never-ending battle, and he can never win because the future there's always some. I just never got a sense of a coherent story at any point, and then there was the Future's End was a disaster, and I vowed I would. I tried giving it a try with Future's End, and I couldn't. I didn't like it, and this actually has an ending. This story has an ending, and I kind of like it. I like the romance, the hint of romancer. I like the Boom character. I actually 6 issues. It has a self-contained story, and I probably will come back and give it a look see when it comes back in 2023. So I don't mind this, and I'm actually kind of surprised because I kind of like the older Bruce Wayne as the mentor from the cartoon. The odd time that I did watch it, but this actually worked for me. So, and Kelly and Lansing don't always they're always kind of hit and miss with me, but this is one where I actually I'll give them props. I enjoyed this, and I enjoyed the ending, and I love the character design. I wish we'd actually see more of this. I don't even know what the character is called. The Gotham when it infects Lumos. That does look extraordinary. It almost looks like a cross between a psychotic Hawkman and or crazy demon angel holding. I mean, it looks really epic. It looks really really well done. I like Todd McFarlane should do a figure like that of this character. It's pretty cool. But yeah, very well done. And for 6 issues, I mean, it's. I would recommend people if you haven't not checked out Batman Beyond before. This is a 6 issue self-contained story, and you get the gist of Batman Beyond. So it's pretty good.
Well, when we saw previously the Gotham, you remember when Terry went to the mayor's mansion and it turns out it was like this like holodeck like trap, and it
Yeah.
transformed. It turned out to just be some old homeless guy that it transformed, and he fought that. That's the same kind of hard light projection that it transformed the homeless guy into, that it transforms Lumos into. And I think, if I remember correctly, in that issue, it was just referred to as Sword.
Hmm.
So this one looks very similar. I think his little spike on the forehead for the homeless guy might have been blue. Here
Right.
it's white with like hard light on it. So
Yeah. The Sword
uh,
of Gotham, right? The Sword of
yeah,
Gotham.
so I think I would think it's the same, but yeah, I mean that splash page is just it was just so good. It looks so menacing and terrifying. So
Yeah.
yeah, and again, like you and I both said, I mean, despite the difficulty of saying her name, Beam Boom not Boom Ma, still can't say it. I think again, a very interesting character. I think Lumos is an interesting character. So yeah, look forward to the return, especially if it's those same two guys writing it.
Yeah.
So you
Sure.
mentioned kind of some kids stories here. So we got Dark Knights of Steel, Tales from the Three Kingdoms, and it is interesting that they're all sort of prequel. We get 3 stories in here. First one's written by Tom Taylor, art and color by Casper Wingard, letters by Wes Abbott. Story of some orphans, including Jimmy Olsen, in the kingdom of the L's, I guess you'd say, which was kind of interesting. I'll let Rocky get into detail. The second story is The Flock, written by Jay Kristoff, who I'm not familiar with. The art is by Sean Isaacs, colored by Romulo Fajardo Jr., lettered by Wes Abbott. Big fan of Sean Isaacs. If that name sounds familiar, we just talked about his first issue of Thunderbolts last New Comics Wednesday that Jim Zub is writing. And then the last story, I'm just looking for the credits here, gives us the Dark Knights of Steel version of Bane. It's written by C.S. Picot. The art is by Michelle Bandini, and colors are by Antonio Fabello, with letters by Wes Abbott. So give us your thoughts on these 3 stories.
I only actually I just skimmed the first two, and I just sort of read the I just read the Bane one was because I saw somebody that looked like Bane, and I thought I got to read this. I really like the Bane one, but I didn't. I don't feel I can comment on the first two. I'll let you comment on those. But the third story with Bane, I actually quite liked because the whole idea that Bane is actually trying to recruit and actually trained a young Bruce Wayne to sort of actually obtain his birthright to overthrow the L's, so to speak, and then he ends up betraying Bane and swearing allegiance to the L's. I mean, it's kind of Game of Thrones like. I thought it was kind of cool, and I thought it was really well done, and I also quite like the art as well. So, uh, yeah, I'm looking forward to reading the first two in greater detail. I apologize, Jace. I like being more prepared here. The weekend just got a little ahead of me with a lot of visits with relatives here, but I enjoyed the Bane story, and yeah. Beyond that, I'll have to let you talk about the other two.
Okay, yeah, no worries. Life definitely happens. So the first one, I think the art perfectly suits it by Casper Wingard, whose art to me kind of suits more all ages type stories. And this is certainly a good introduction into kind of the world of that Tom Taylor has created here, the world of Dark Knights of Steel. Um, I sort of feel like the popularity of this, popularity of DC versus vampires, popularity of deceased, all these different worlds that Tom Taylor has created within the DC universe itself. Like, well, what if we took the DC universe and we mixed it with this, or mixed it with that? And so, I mean, it is a good way to sort of bring in new readers, right? So you mentioned Game of Thrones. Um, this could possibly get somebody who's interested in fantasy. It could be their gateway into the DCU, and maybe they only read Dark Knights of Steel stuff to start, but they could branch out to other things. So that's interesting for me. That being said, I'm not the biggest fan of Dark Knights of Steel. I've mentioned it. While I find it sort of interesting and cool to see these different versions, and happy to see these different versions of characters, it's just I don't love it the way some people love it. So although this first story is interesting with orphans that are being taken from this orphanage, Arkham Orphanage, um, including Jimmy Olsen and Batman and Superman and Supergirl. Their Dark Knights of Steel counterparts go looking for these uh, orphans that are supposedly kidnapped, and it's Man Bat who's taken them, and they attack Man Bat, and the orphans are like, no, no, no. I mean, again, a little bit tropey, a little bit predictable. It's been done before. No, Man Bat's actually not the bad guy. The bad guy is actually Arkham, it's female Arkham here, who's performing experiments on these kids, and uh, they go and they imprison her and say, oh, it's not the kid. She's been experimenting on them. It's not Man Bat. So again, it's been done before, and the thing that most bothered me about it, so they take this Arkham character, Elizabeth Arkham is her name, who's been experimenting on these kids, and some of them have been deformed and given powers, but at a cost. And they, like I said, they imprison her. They throw her in the dungeon of the castle. Actually, I'm sorry, they don't even get that far. She's being supposedly taken to the dungeon of the castle in this wagon with bars on the windows. And who shows up but Amanda Waller? And says, hey, you're going to be working in service to the kingdom. And Elizabeth Arkham says, wow, how would the king and queen feel about this service? And Waller says, well, there's no reason for them to know. You work for me now. And all I could think was, it doesn't matter the world, it doesn't matter the version of DC multiverse that Amanda Waller is in. No matter what version, she's a piece of shit in all of them, and I really can't stand her. Like, how is she any different than Lex Luthor? This is totally something Luthor would do. She's just such a piece of crap. Can't even get away from her being a piece of crap in this Dark Knights of Steel. So, again, thought it was kind of predictable. It definitely wasn't my favorite. I enjoyed the second one a lot more. It's basically their version of Halloween, and Harley and Clark and Bruce go out into the city at Harley's urging, because she thinks that Clark needs to see kind of how his kingdom really is, and this is a way he can do it in disguise without anybody finding him. Bruce tags along because Bruce, he has sworn, as you mentioned, to protect the L's. But what ends up happening is they get Harley's wearing this necklace that gets stolen by the Robins, which is this gang of kids, and it's everybody you would expect. It's Tim Drake, it's Damien, um, it's Jason Todd, it's Stephanie Brown, and they're basically they steal the necklace because they're Robin Hoods, if you will, and they say, hey, we only steal from people who look like they can afford it, and at the end of the story, basically, um, they agree to sort of work with the elves to help make the kingdom a better place. So we've seen some Robins show up in the main story. So this is kind of how they meet and get involved. And then you mentioned the story with Bane, which I thought was kind of interesting that Bruce betrays Bane at the end. The other thing of it is, like, when you think about it, Bane is sort of not a bad guy, but he sort of is. Like his
Yeah.
loyalties to the Waynes. So you can kind of see. And so I was like, oh, Bane's not really a bad guy because the elves do end up harming the kingdom, but then at the same time, not really.
Well,
So
I think it's interesting because now in the main storyline, it might be that Bruce ends up going to recruiting Bane because if he feels that the L that he's been betrayed, so it might make for some interesting alliances moving forward in the main story proper.
yeah, and the other part about all this is that I feel like the main story has lost momentum. I feel like it's been forever since we've had an issue.
Yeah.
It hasn't been moving along very quickly because Tom Taylor's been throwing his curveballs, but we're still not really sure who the big bad is. There's hints of somebody from outer space. Is it the Green Man? Does that mean it's Green Lantern? Is it somebody that's infected with kryptonite? Like we just don't know. But
Yeah.
at times you felt like the elves were good. They were aligned with the Waynes, and then the Waynes were killed. But are the elves really bad? Are they not? Like at times we've thought that even Superman himself was the bad guy, and then maybe not. I don't know. Again, it's dragged on too long with all this convoluted. I know Tom Taylor's trying to make it interesting, but sometimes straightforward and certainly being released on schedule is best. So anyway, let's move on. Up next, we have Sword of Azrael Book 2. This is from writer Dan Waters. Art is by Nicola Semegia. Colors by Marisa Louise. Letters by Hassan Atsman Elhau. So what I really like about this, well, first of all, I have to say that there's a third variant cover. There's 4 different covers. There are so many freaking covers on all the books this week. I don't know why there's so many. But one of them is a variant cover by Gleb Melnikov. Matthias Manini and Gleb Melnikov. And maybe it's just because of the trade dress that harkens back to kind of it's got the same sort of wording and trade dress that the third, or that the original Sword of Azrael
Hmm.
miniseries had. And so, yeah, I for a second, I had to do a double take. I'm like, is that Joe Quesada? I mean, it looks so much like the original, certainly the original style. And again, probably the Sword of Azrael banner and trade dress makes me think of that. But it's just
Yeah.
so, yeah, it's up on the screen if you're watching this
Yeah.
on YouTube. But yeah, I love that cover. I was like, oh, great, is that Joe Quesada? Turns out no, but it is really interesting. The other part of this, and I'll let Rocky talk a little more about what actually happens in the story, but the reason that I'm enjoying this, and it has gotten better as it's gone on. So I mentioned when we first read Azrael, when he first came back in Batman Urban Legends by the same writer, Dan Waters, how it felt like it was leaning into the religious fanaticism of John Paul Valley, and I didn't like that. Maybe it's because I was raised Catholic and I really do not need to read anything to do with Catholicism at all. It does not interest me. And to me, that's the least interesting aspect, or always has been, about Azrael. Um, and it just so much of the religion stuff just didn't interest me. Like, it was a slog to read. But what's so great about what Dan Waters has done, so it's almost like he feels the way I have, and he's gotten to the point where I've wanted Azrael to be all along, where I want John Paul Valley to be, and where I'm most interested in reading about him. And that's this idea of this religious belief that he has, this fanaticism, is programmed into him. It's not real. He doesn't really believe. I mean, certainly when he became Azrael, um, when his father showed up at the door of his dorm room, you know, in the last moments of his life, and it activated the programming of the system that was implanted in John Paul Valley so long ago. That's when the belief came. The belief is part of the programming. He wasn't somebody who, yes, a religion was somewhat a part of his life, but he wasn't some religious nut like Azrael is. And again, that's the least interesting part of the character to me. So Dan Waters has started with that, but is bringing John Paul Valley along to a place where he realizes that that's not where he should be. That's not what he actually believes. And all he's trying to do is just control the programming in any way he can. And so this is very much an evolution of the character toward a place where I would like the character to be. So I think that's why I'm enjoying it so much. The other thing that's great is Waters is clearly mining so much of what he planted in those stories, which I felt a little bit at the time when we were reading the Batman Urban Legends story, like, God, what's the point of this? To just see him out there working in a hospice facility and, going after these supposed zombies and meeting up with one of the Knights of Templar, as, an order that supposedly had died. I didn't know what the point of it was. Now we see that those were seeds that were planted by Waters because he knew he was going to have this Azrael miniseries, or maybe, based on the reception of that urban legend story, he was going to get a chance to do this. So I like where this is going. The Nicholas Semeja art, it's not my favorite type of art. It's a little messier and a little more sketchy than I would like, but seeing Vengeance, the daughter of Bane, as a part of the story, and seeing the seeds that have been planted by Waters himself very recently already start to bear fruit is really interesting to me. I like, maybe it's because I have always loved Azrael's visual, why I want to like the character more, and one of the things that's held me back is that religious aspect to the character that I talked about. And it feels like Waters is trying to, it's always going to have to be part of his character because of his origin and the way that the foundation of the character exists. But I feel like this sort of duality that he's bringing to it, that Azrael is a completely separate persona for John Paul Valley, and he realizes that the religious beliefs that he's had are all just programmed into him. Like, those are interesting aspects of the character to me that I think can get him to a place where, yeah, I would jump on an Azrael monthly series without a second thought right now. So, what are your thoughts on this?
I enjoy this. I love what Dan Waters is doing here. He's making Azrael. I like that he's further distinguishing Azrael away from Batman. And Azrael is a very different character than Batman. And yet, ironically enough, of course, because he used to, he's part of that famous storyline. He's he is nonetheless a very unique character, and Dan Waters is doing a great job continuing to make him unique. He does a masterful job here with two other characters, this Sariel, this angel of death, who we Azrael originally wants to take out. John Paul Valley, who has, of course, he's got this programmed. He's programmed. His faith is almost programmed into him, and he's this Sariel, this woman, this angel of death. She also, he's led to believe, has some programming of her own, but she's killed a bunch of people. She kills a bunch of priests, and yet. Vengeance, and this poor fellow woman is a Templar knight who Azrael believes was wiped out in the past, thousands of years ago. But we have this poor fellow, this Templar knight, working with Vengeance because they know the importance of this Sariel. Now, uh, why is it important that they save this Sariel? We don't really know yet. But it's very interesting that this Sariel, it's revealed, is actually an angel. She doesn't have programming, and that's the big reveal at the end, that this Sariel isn't programmed. She's an actual angel, and she's an angel of death. It's quite interesting, and you touched upon just the themes of religion, of faith. What does Jean Paul Valley actually believe? Is it all programming? Is he going to discover a new faith or his own kind of faith? How much of how much of what John Paul Valley thinks and believes, how much of it is part of the program versus what does he actually believe? Because the way Dan Waters has masterfully built some of these Jean-Paul Valley stories in various Batman books, Batman Urban Legends, and there was a one shot. I think there was the first issue of the Here. I mean, we're almost it's almost as if he's got two sides of him. He's kind of schizophrenic. He's got two personalities, but he kind of doesn't. But he's got like the real fanatical religious side that it will go so far as to kill, if necessary, in the fighting for Christ, and so it's very interesting that he ends up fighting this. He thinks he's going to really do some good by taking out this Sariel, this angel of death, but yet poor fellow is actually a Templar Knight that has as much honor as he does, and she's tied up because the Templar Knights were created initially to eliminate the world of Lazarus pits, and so that's kind of interesting there too. So all this, how all this is going to weave together. So uh, I'm really curious. I don't know where this is going, but Dan Waters has done a really good job, and we've stuck with it. Fortunately, we've read all the backstory. This is really good, and I think I can't wait. This is going to make for a good trade because so far this is a story that it's consistent. It's really built up, and it does seem to be going somewhere. So I'm interested in the characters, in particular, Poor Fellow. She's my favorite character so far, but we'll see as it moves forward.
Yeah, I'm not 100% convinced Sariel is actually an angel. I don't necessarily believe anything that poor fellow says because she's certainly trying to manipulate Sariel into coming with her.
Yeah.
But she could be. I guess we'll see. All right, up next we have Batman 127 from writer Chip Zdarsky. Again, a ton of covers. The main cover by Jorge Jimenez, I wanted to like it more, but the fact that you can see Batman's eye through the lens just freaked me out. I couldn't stop looking at that eye. Just thought it was kind of weird. But anyway, there's a Harley Quinn 30th anniversary cover, and there's a cover by Alex Garner, and yeah, tons of covers. Anyway, Jorge Jimenez is also the interior artist. I think I mentioned Zdarsky's the writer. We've got Tome More as the colorist, and Clayton Cowell does the letters. This was an interesting one, and not to toot my own horn and say I told you so, but exactly as I predicted, it's Batman himself who created Failsafe for exactly the reasons that you think. We have an early scene where Superman shows up, and the scene takes place right after Justice League Tower of Babel storyline. That's the one where they found out that Batman had files on all the other Justice Leaguers with a way to defeat them. Ra's al Ghul stole them. It was a big battle. Again, it's a very famous story. And Superman asks, well, what about how we beat you? You're supposedly the most formidable of us all. What's your plan? So come to find out, Zdarsky's mining from the Grant Morrison run, the Batman RIP storyline, and Morrison throughout his whole run, because he's Morrison and it's what they like to do, had gone back, and from way back Batman 113, this Batman who was from an alien planet, actually. That's where Bruce Wayne got this idea of this Batman of Zur-En-Arrh, and Morrison, kind of interesting. So that was the name of the planet, right? Zur-En-Arrh. And what Morrison did was say Batman actually got that name from hearing the last words, or some of the last words, from Thomas Wayne, Zorro in Arkham. It was him saying the night of his death that, yeah, if a character like Zorro was around in the real world, he'd end up in Arkham. And that kind of stuck in Bruce's mind. And Bruce created this persona, this Batman of Zur-En-Arrh, who is supposedly like the persona of Batman without Bruce Wayne, right? Without the morality of Bruce Wayne or the weaknesses of Bruce Wayne to hold him back. So how did Batman create Failsafe? Well, he, in his way, it's not really explained how he did it, but in his way, he's created this backup for Batman when there's a challenge that's way too hard for Bruce Wayne Batman to handle. He will transform and become the ultimate Batman, which is the Batman of Zur-En-Arrh. And when he transforms that into this Batman of Zur-En-Arrh, his answer to how to stop Batman is to create this failsafe character. So failsafe is sort of the backup plan of a backup plan for the original Batman. So that's why Bruce doesn't have any knowledge of how to defeat Failsafe or any knowledge that he existed, but there's a vague familiarity there. And so it's exactly as I said. Failsafe was, created by Bruce himself, regardless of whatever kind of window dressing that Zdarsky puts on there. It was Bruce himself who has created this, and even this Batman Zur-In-R, because again, it is still Bruce Wayne's body, and as he's fighting alongside Tim Drake trying to defeat this android, he still is in Bruce Wayne's body, which has been through the ringer over these last few issues fighting Failsafe. And obviously, Bruce did not build in or allow there to be any weaknesses. So as Zur-In-R is getting his butt kicked, just the way that he's talking and the way he's dealing with this android kind of prompts Bruce Wayne, who's sort of, it's almost like the way Bruce Banner is inside the Hulk right now, right? Where he's like this observer, this impartial observer. He does not like the way Batman Zur-In-R is talking about Tim Drake as this expendable soldier, and it kind of awakens Bruce, and he's like, this is not the right way to handle this. So he kind of awakens, and he's back, and it's the original, even though he's still wearing the Zur-In-R bright yellow, red, purple costume, which for some reason, as garish as it is, I sort of like it, as terrible as it is to admit. But anyway, he's getting his butt kicked. Like whether it's Zur-In-R, whether it's Bruce Wayne, it doesn't really matter. He's been through the ringer, and this android, it has no weaknesses. And luckily, at the final moment, Barbara Gordon has called in for reinforcements, and who shows up but Superman, which, some people might not like it. Some Batman fans might not like it, the fact that Bruce has to be bailed out here, but I love it. I love it because, I'm thinking back to the world's finest days. They are supposed to be best friends. Plus that scene when Superman shows up and he's kind of backlit and all you see is his silhouette except for his eyes. He just looks badass. I prefer that just smaller panel to the full page spread on the next page where we see him standing, the final page where we see Superman standing there. Yeah, it's a decent Superman shot, but the menace of the shadowy eyes and only seeing the eyes by Jorge Menez I thought was great, and I can't wait to see Superman take this thing and crunch it down into a little ball like a piece of foil, and have this all be. It even could be anticlimactic. I won't care. It could all be over in one panel. Like opening splash page of the next issue is Superman just grabbing the thing and crumpling up into a ball of
Yeah.
foil, and it would show like it's always that idea of who would win in a fight between Batman and Superman, and Batman fans are always like, oh, if Batman has time to prepare, blah blah blah. And I'm like, no, it doesn't. It wouldn't be like that. Superman could kill him from orbit with a blast of heat vision and game over, right? Like I almost would rather it be that way, but I am enjoying this. It is interesting, and there is a backup story I'll talk about in a minute, but I want to let Rocky talk about the main story. But the backup story, also written by Zdarsky, Two Birds, One Throne finale. Art is by Belen Ortega, Luis Guerrero on colors, Clayton Collin letters. And we'll talk about the backup in a second, but what did you think about the main story?
Well, I've never been a fan of Zur-In-R. I've never been a fan of Grant Morrison's Batman, quite frankly. I love his Batman and Robin, but most of his Batman work I've not really been a huge fan of. And the whole concept of Zur-In-R I always thought was just ridiculous. I wasn't really a big fan of it. But actually, Zdarsky does something here with it that actually is kind of interesting, kind of fun. I like the fact that Bruce Wayne sort of regains, even though he gets defeated, really, and Superman is there ultimately to supposedly rescue him. We'll find out next issue. I suspect Failsafe might be more of a competition to Superman than might give Superman a surprise. But in any event, I like the fact that Bruce Wayne is sort of fighting is like you said. It's like you got the Zur-In-R Batman and you got the Bruce Wayne Batman, and they're cooperating with each other. And I like the fact that Zur-In-R is overconfident. Zur-In-R figures that because he created Failsafe, he can defeat him. But that's not the case here. And that's what I like, is that even Zur-In-R is defeated by Failsafe. And Zur-In-R has as much stubbornness as Bruce Wayne does. And what's even more fascinating is that Zur-In-R can't remember how to defeat Failsafe. He knows that there's probably an off switch of some kind, but he programmed himself so he doesn't know. So as a failsafe to failsafe, even failsafe doesn't know how to. Oh,
Yeah,
pardon
he
me.
says he
Even
knows
Zoronar
there's
does.
a.
Yeah.
He, at one point, he says he knows there's a self destruct and he wants to get back down to the Batcave to set it off. But then Failsafe is like, "Oh no, I disabled that self destruct,
Yeah,
dumbass."
no. So you really got to wonder here. Well, what I hope doesn't happen, and I fear it's probably going to is I don't know. Like I'm not. Um, I don't know. You know what? Quite frankly, we've gotten a very through Tinian's Batman and through for the last probably the last 3 or 4 years, we've gotten a Batman that's been significantly compromised and weak, and he's been defeated, and he's gone through the ringer a few times. So maybe I think we're approaching now our Uber Batman phase, and this might be it. And every now and then, every writer assumes Batman is more powerful than most, and this whole idea that Batman, of course, can create a failsafe that can probably defeat the entire Justice League because Batman created him. I hope it doesn't go to that extreme. I mean, really, if failsafe can take out Superman next issue, which I mean, I can't imagine that it's going to be like you said. I agree with you. If Superman could just use his heat vision and melt failsafe, but I assume that failsafe has probably got some kryptonite in one of his arms or some damn thing. It's going to throw a wrench into things. But I hope Zardasky. It's going to be interesting to see what he does with this because it's going to the extreme. Because I mean, Batman. This is really like ultimately this is Batman versus his best self. This is Batman versus Batman. So you know, I mean, the only one that can defeat Batman is Batman, and that's kind of what makes this so interesting. Is how in the hell does Batman defeat himself when he's created this massive weapon failsafe that ultimately he's removed from his own memory the off switch. I mean, it is interesting. The art here is fantastic. I love it. I love this is done really well, and I love the battle of wits, the psychological battle between Zernar and Bruce Wayne. It's very well done visually. It's really easy to see what's going on. The art's just stunning. The colors are just pop off the page. It's quite good. So I am absolutely captivated by this, and I'm curious to see if Sardasky goes, if the ending's going to be, I'm, is it going to be tropey, predictable? I don't know. So far, I'm intrigued here, and I love this cover. It's not too often just Batman's face on a cover looks so amazing, but that Batman, that Zurinar face on the cover looks amazing. But I'll let you talk
Yeah,
about the backup. Sorry.
yeah, very very curious as you said how because I could see it going like you said, even more into this Uber Batman, and we've talked about it a ton on the. I think we've even dedicated whole episodes to it with Trevor from Dark Knight Nation about
Yeah.
how Batman just he every writer that comes on wants to top the one, and it's this power creep, and I hope Zdarsky doesn't go there. I mean, Zdarsky's best when he's infusing his stories with emotion, and that doesn't need an overpowered Batman. So I hope he keeps that in mind. As far as the backup goes, so we see what happened to the Penguin. The Penguin didn't kill himself. No surprise there. He's gone to Metropolis. He got a nose job, and he's working as a florist of all things. And Catwoman's able to track him down, and he gives her some mumbo jumbo about wanting to just escape Gotham. He says he's addicted to Batman. Half of what he does in terms of trying to amass power and break the law, whatever, is to flaunt it in front of Batman, and he wants to just get off that treadmill once and for all, get off that hamster wheel. And so everything, as you might imagine, is not 100% true what he's saying. There is a kernel of truth there, but he's not 100% reformed and wanting to be out of the way, and he actually hopes that his daughter and son that we met last issue actually can defeat Batman. I don't know why he would think that. He's never been able to defeat Batman, but he at least wants them to be a challenge for Batman. The other interesting part of the story is Catwoman tracks him down and does have this heart to heart with him. And again, I think there is some truth to what he's saying, but you can't change who you are fundamentally, and he is a criminal fundamentally. But what's interesting is in this conversation, Catwoman talks about, yeah, it's tempting, like what he's talking. I'm not going to give up being Catwoman. I'm not going to, leave Gotham, but I can see where Cobblepot's coming from. So, what did you think?
I liked it. I mean, this was really surprising to me. I did not expect this. It threw me. I was so that's a compliment right there. I'm actually enjoying. I enjoy the twist so far in this from a story perspective a little bit more than the main story by Zardasky. The main story has cool action sequences that is I like the art better. But in terms of a story, this is actually really interesting. The idea that can the Penguin redeem himself? Now, there's a strong suggestion at the end here that the Penguin does perhaps have an ulterior motive and agenda, and this is all part of a plan, and he's trying something new. But that's what makes it even more intriguing. On the surface, I mean, what a great way to deceive Batman, because Batman is, I mean, Batman can get as dark as he wants, but Batman always seems to he's a sucker for one of his villains redeeming themselves. I mean, he's all, he doesn't kill. He has a code against killing. Arkham Asylum. I mean, I always, it's a revolving door. Well, I mean, holy moly. I mean, why is Harvey Dent the only one that can redeem himself? Why is Two-Face the only one that we seem to get a constant redemption arc from? Now we're getting one with the Penguin, but yet Penguin is doing it, he's got an ulterior motive here and he's got a plan. And you got to wonder, did the Penguin even have something to do with the death of some of his children? Because he didn't really seem to care one way or the other that some of his own children, he's got a lot of offspring. He doesn't really seem to give a rat's ass. I mean, he had a really strange clause in the will there that ultimately resulted in a lot of his own children killing him.
Yeah, he did say, Catwoman brings that up. He did say, well, that was not my intention. Now,
Yeah,
granted, he could be lying.
yeah.
He
I
could be
think,
lying to his
well,
face, but
I suspect maybe he's being a little bit. I think he's maybe fibbing just a bit. Anyways, I like the questions I'm asking because it's like, how much of this was he in control of? How much? Because and even with utilizing Selena Kyle here, Selena Kyle sort of keeping his secret because Selena Kyle is always playing both sides of the fence. That's what makes her so fascinating as a foil to Batman. Their on again, off again relationship, and she sort of works with. She kind of has that uncomfortable interplay where she's with the Batman's rogues gallery, and then she's also sleeping with Batman on the side all the time. And so the rogues gallery, I'm always surprised that they trust Selena with anything, and yet clearly the Penguin here is trusting her. And I I, I mean, God, in any event, it's interesting. I'm really curious to see where this is going. This to me, this elevates Oswald Cobblepot because, quite frankly, I um I like the fact that he faked his own death, and I want to get away from the Tom King idea that this is a guy that sleeps with penguins and all that little funny nonsense. And this actually, I think, elevates the intelligence of Oswald Cobblepot as being somebody who he's fine. Maybe he's bringing more of an A game here, and he's not. He's got a plan, and I'm hoping that maybe this is going to play a central role in Zardasky because he's done a really good job on his Daredevil. He's built a long form story. His Daredevil run's fantastic, and I really would love to see Oswald Cobblepot. This is all part of a master plan, and he comes back in all his glory, and maybe as a mafioso in both Metropolis and Gotham. So but maybe that's me expecting too much. But I think Zardasky's bringing his A game on this.
yeah, I mean, this isn't the first time we've seen somebody recently try to level up the Penguin. Wasn't it in Mariko Tamaki's detective run where he said himself he wanted to level up
Yeah.
when he teamed up with who was it with I can't remember his name now, the guy whose daughter was killed in the Vile storyline.
Worth.
Worth, yeah,
Worth, Mr.
yeah.
Worth.
When he
Yeah.
teamed up with Worth,
Yeah.
he was saying, I'm tired of being overlooked. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
this whole idea of him as kind of a punchline, kind of a joke, um,
Yeah.
as the just running the casino or whatever. Yeah, let's get back to him being a little more menacing, a little more formidable. So, all right, up next we have Black Adam, the Justice Society Files, Atom Smasher #1. This one's from writer Kevin Scott. Travis Mercer is the artist. John Kalis on colors. Rob Lee on letters. Talk about the art first. Absolutely amazing. Love this Travis Mercer art. Love the colors by John Kalish, which are really bright. This feels very much just like a traditional superhero story. Not convoluted, very straightforward. A couple of these Justice Society file stories have been a little, I don't want to say confusing, but just based on what they are and how needing to tie into uh, the Black Adam movie, they've been a little complicated. This one is not. This is Albert Rothstein, who's Al Pratt, the original Adam. Albert Rothstein is his nephew, and he has the ability to grow in size. And when he grows in size, his skin gets thicker, and he can withstand bullets and all that sort of thing. And that's explained in the story in a very expositional way, but it doesn't come across as boring or like, oh my god, walls of dialogue kind of thing. Of all these one shots, this one is the one that just sort of just reads so free flowing. The pacing in it is fantastic. So it's really great. The art, again, really great. The backup story that is continued throughout is here as well. It seems like that story is about to reach its climax. It is also written by Cavan Scott. I'm sorry, it's written by Brian Q. Miller, actually. And the art in it is, at least in this issue, is by Marco Santucci. So great colors also by Michael Attea, who often works with Marco Santucci, Rob Lee on letters. So I enjoyed this issue. I thought it was really great. What did you think?
I uh, I actually, this is my least favorite so far out of all of them. My favorite so far has been the Hawkman one shot for the Black Adam movie, because I just thought it was the most, I thought it was the most interesting, the most frankly creative. And this, I found the story here to be fairly, uh, I guess, derivative and tropey, and yet at the same time, I agree with you. It's well paced. The art's fantastic, and quite frankly, what else was I expecting? This is actually really good. If, for people that want, I mean, this basically gives you everything you need to know about Adam Smasher, everything you need to know. It's just very, very predictable. He's just
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
and
It is a simple. It is a simple story.
yeah,
I'll
it's
give you
very
that.
simple. It's just, and it's sort of like, I hate to say it because, but it's very CW like. It's like he wants to be a hero, just like his uncle. He wants to be a hero, and well, I would have liked a little bit more about, maybe even more of, maybe like an origin tale or something with a little bit more grit, a little bit, maybe something that maybe we're gonna get some of that in the movie. I don't know. You never know. But I just felt that you had an opportunity here to maybe to, spice things up a bit, and it wasn't really taken. But then the Cyclone one shot was kind of similar, but I felt was a little bit. I thought it was a little bit more interesting as well. But hey, this is good. I'm getting these. I absolutely love the cover. What a great cover with Adam Smasher with his hand looking down. That looks really good. The cover. I think that there's only. Yeah, there's only cover A, I believe. If there's more than one covers, we weren't provided them as a preview copy, but cover A, if looks really good. And but yeah, it was nothing. He's just a guy who can grow real big, and he's a hero, and he basically starts. Intergang is dealing with weapons, and he takes out an intergang who are basically buying and selling weapons, and so it's clearly what one thing that all these one shots going into the Black Adam movie have done is that they made it very clear that the bad guys are Intergang. Intergang is the bad guy. This is the mafioso. This is the threat that everyone needs to worry about is Intergang. And yeah, and that's kind of really it. And you mentioned the backup feature, which continues to tell the story. I think of Adriana, who is Black Black Adam's love interest in the movie, who I believe will probably, she'll become ISIS at some point. I'm guessing she's going to become ISIS at some point in the movie or in the inevitable sequel that comes out. And so we get a backdrop of her, uh, also again trying to basically take on Intergang, and yeah, I and we get it's weird. One of the criticisms I have is I would have much I would have much preferred to have this backstory of what appears to be this backstory of Black Adam when he was still a slave. That should be a one shot. in and of itself, as opposed to interspersed between the three titles, because I feel like I've got to remind myself what the story is. I got to go back and read. So I'm actually a little bit lost in this one. Not that it's that tough to catch on to, but I would have preferred to have had it this story instead of broken up over three issues. I would have preferred to have a one separate uh, story for this backup, because I think it's actually more interesting and is going to tell us more and give us more Easter eggs for the movie than the actual origins of Atom Smasher and Cyclone to begin with. But so I think it's worth picking up probably for. I like the backup features myself first and foremost. So what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. The backup story is way, especially when you get such a simple story in the beginning, in the main story. And again, I mean, the whole reason these exist is to introduce people to these characters, Cyclone and Atom Smasher. So I get why they're a little simpler. Hawkman, to a lesser extent, he's a little more well known. So then, yeah, having the most complicated story be in the backup and having it split up, yeah, definitely a lot harder. So I don't know that that was the best way to do it. I tend to agree with you. What I rather would have seen would have been like a reprint in the backup of like a previous Atom Smasher story, or Nucleon as he was known. Same thing with Cyclone. You could put a little 8-pager in there from previous material. As far as this one being simpler and a little more predictable, I guess you'd say, Atom Smasher in a way is sort of a very vanilla character. I mean, he hasn't. There's nobody that's done like Tom King has not done the prototype story or the the end all be all Atom Smasher story.
Uh,
I don't know why they ever changed his name. I'm glad they did. This costume's way better. I mean, he was created in the '80s. He was
mm.
part of Infinity Incorporated, and he very much was of the time and had this red mohawk that looked terrible. Um, and so, yeah, I love this costume. It's much better looking, but yeah, to me, he's. I mean, Jeff Johns did do some things with him in Justice Society of America, but it was never. He's not a character that has a lot of complexity to him, like I said. So that he's got untapped potential. I'll put it that way. So, all right, well, let's move on. We've got Dark Crisis #4 up next. Kind of interesting. I think that I have a specific reason why I like this issue, and I feel like I'm finally jumping on board this. But I see what Rocky's saying, because you're sort of coming around to what I was saying before. Is like, when is this going to get started? This is issue 4 of 7, and is this going to be another situation just like with Infinite Frontier, where we ended up getting 3 miniseries to tell one story that then led into this? So I mentioned it before, like, why are we getting all these other series, and it's not even a line wide crossover, and maybe that's okay because they don't really do those anymore. But like, we're over halfway, and it's like not much has happened yet. So, but we'll talk about it anyway. Written by Joshua Williamson, Daniel Sampere on art, Alejandro Sanchez does the colors, Tom Napolitano on letters. Give us your thoughts on this.
Well, uh, you're right. I mean, generally, I think a lot of this it still feels like setup, and I'm still enjoying the story, and I guess I don't mind the setup here. I'm just maybe getting a little bit impatient. This is Hal Jordan. Last issue ended with Hal Jordan going into the Black Lantern power battery, where all the dark, or I guess all the dark, the great darkness is within that, and he ends up essentially dying just like the rest of the Justice League. And he's also apparently in a world that where I guess his dream world, just like the other world without a Justice League. All the one shots we've got with Superman in a dream world, and with Flash and Wonder Woman, et cetera, et cetera. Barry Allen was released, kind of snapped out of it with the help of Wally West and the pages of Flash with that crossover. And so Wally West, or pardon me, Barry Allen ends up meeting Hal Jordan here, and they basically have a conversation, telling the reader what we've already known, what we already know. We know from previous issues, and we know from all the one shots. And the whole idea is, again, all the Justice League from Earth Zero has always been the nexus of the multiverse, and so it Joshua Williamson uses it to remind the reader that Earth, the prime Earth Designate Zero is the nexus of the multiverse, and it's sort of like the metaverse, and it's the most powerful. And for whatever reason, the heroes, the Justice League heroes, these world that they're in, they're the energies that they're using up in these imaginary worlds that they're in is apparently is feeding Pariah's machine, and we don't know what the machine does, but you can guess that the machine is to create an infinite number of Earths, because Pariah's ultimate goal is, because he thinks he's in control of the great darkness, is to create the infinite to create infinite Earths again, and to restore his original world that existed prior to the original crisis. And um, what's I felt that a lot of this comic in particular, I was actually disappointed that I felt, and some of the scenes that didn't resonate with me well at all, and I suspect probably maybe they did resonate with yourself, because you say you enjoyed this issue perhaps more than the other ones so far. Is there's a scene with Alan Scott. Nightwing is, I think, overly depressed with Beast Boy in the hospital. Beast Boy is fine. He says some really dumb things. He actually thinks like Gar believes he was killed, Alan. That's why he's not waking up. Like, just really dumb things. Why would you think somebody's not waking up because he thinks Gar thinks he's dead? I mean, he's just ridiculously overly depressed, and I just didn't buy it. I don't think Nightwing would be that depressed. I felt the character of Nightwing feels forced here. In order to create some drama, so when Nightwing inevitably steps up to the plate, which isn't in this issue, and this is the 4th issue out of 7, but a great art and great speech by Alan Scott, and I know what Joshua Williamson is going for. It just didn't quite hit me the way that I wanted to hit me, and I have a feeling that there's a lot of people that I know there's a lot of people that are impatient, and I'm starting to buy into it a bit. But look, the most positive thing I can say about this, I love the Legion of Doom, and I love the Deathstroke Secret Society. I love it. I mean, the first half of this is so boring, but it really made up for it for me at the end, with when Deathstroke and the Secret Society, they attack the Legion of Doom, because Black Adam is trying to recruit the Legion of Doom, telling the Legion of Doom, look, that the Justice League is dead. The other heroes on this planet, they're useless. They're pathetic. They don't know. They don't use lethal force. They don't know what needs to be done here. And the fact that they have they attack that Deathstroke controlled, who is infected by the Great Darkness, is now going to. They're attacking the Legion of Doom. It's a much more. I found that it was a much more satisfying series of battles when watching the villains fight each other than when the heroes fought. I enjoyed it a lot more, probably because more is at stake. Villains actually want to kill each other, and it feels more real. Like when Lex Luthor's attacking Deathstroke here, Lex Luthor is out to kill Deathstroke, because Lex Luthor he knows that Deathstroke's the nexus, and that he's connected to the darkness that Lex Luthor has detected on the edge of the multiverse. So he knows there's a connection between the Great Darkness and Deathstroke, and ultimately at the end here, the good guy, the bad guys, I guess the badder guys, or Legion of Doom, ends up unfortunately getting defeated, and it looks like Pariah manages to successfully create the infinite Earth. So Pariah apparently is successful. All the running around that the Flash, that Barry Allen and Hal Jordan are doing, trying to find the other members of the Justice League, apparently just by running around from world to world, they're actually feeding, unbeknownst to them, they're actually feeding more power into Pariah's machines that are leading to this creation of the infinite Earths, again, returning them, hearkening them back. And that's how this issue ultimately ends. The art's fantastic. Daniel Sampere is just amazing. I'm enjoying this. One quick little criticism of Joshua Williamson. There's a suggestion here by Swamp Thing that Swamp Thing at one point says, and both Swamp Things make an appearance, both the Alan Moore Swamp Thing and the Levi Ram V Swamp Thing, They suggest that the Great Darkness is not actually evil, that it just is like the Great Darkness is just like a shadow. And it's a criticism because I one of my criticisms of Joshua Williamson's Flash run is that he was always contradicting himself. I felt he was always changing the rules. He never got it right what the Speed Force was, the Sage Force, the Strength Force, and he was like Scott Snyder on steroids. I mean, it was just insane, and he kept changing the rules in some of his stories, and it was inconsistent. Now all of a sudden we're to believe that the Great Darkness isn't a big deal anymore. The Great Darkness is just like the Great Darkness is just like a shadow, and that somebody's corrupting the Great Darkness, and that the Great Darkness is because the Swamp Thing made a deal with the Great Darkness, and so we're supposed to believe Swamp Thing that the Great Darkness doesn't have any ill intent necessarily. It simply is because it's like night. It's like a shadow. And I'm thinking to myself, no, the Great Darkness is a big deal. We have a dark army. We got the Great Darkness, and now the Great Darkness isn't a big deal. All this build up for how long, and the Great Darkness isn't a big deal. And I suspect we're leading to something where the big bad reveal who's corrupting the Great Darkness. Well, I'm guessing it's maybe the Anti-Monitor or somebody, because we don't know what's corrupting the Great Darkness now. All we know is that the Great Darkness just is. It's not that big a deal. I feel like he's compromised the gravitas of this story, but he's actually minimized through Swamp Thing. He's minimized the significance of the threat. In my mind, it disappoints me a little bit. And why not have the Great Darkness? Because bear in mind, when we get into Flashpoint Beyond, Jeff Johns, that issue, the Great Darkness is very clearly indicated in that as being villainous, of being something that can corrupt and destroy. And here, it's just a shadow. It's just darkness, and it's like, I don't know. So again, I got mixed feelings about this. Maybe this will all come through in the end, but I feel that. So I've got some highs and lows, and I'd be really curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I didn't think he was minimizing the Great Darkness at all. I actually like that because I've had the question in my mind ever since we found out that it was going to be the Great Darkness and it was going to be Pariah. Um, the Great Darkness isn't a new concept. It first showed up in Legion of Superheroes way back in the early '80s. Paul Levitz, where Darkseid, um, who no longer existed in the 32nd century, 31st century, or whatever, but his followers had weaponized it. These worshippers of Darkseid had weaponized the Great Darkness. That's similar to what's happening here. So to me, this makes more sense than if it's, because the Great Darkness itself, and I've talked about this, we haven't even seen who the villain is. Well, the villain's Great Darkness. Well, the Great Darkness isn't really sentient, or it never had been previously. So what changed? What happened? Why would it be sentient here and make the decisions it's making when in the 31st century, the Legion of Superhero stories that granted were written 30 years ago, 40 years ago almost, that they wouldn't matter, or it would be different. Like, why would it wasn't sentient when it started, then it became sentient. It attacks here. We have this dark crisis, and then all of a sudden it's not sentient anymore. So to me, this makes more sense. I was glad to actually see that, saying, yeah, there's somebody manipulating it, there's somebody weaponizing it. So, in a way, it makes even more sense, the original Great Darkness saga, that these followers of Darkseid would, find out, hey, even Darkseid himself was manipulated by the Great Darkness when it was weaponized. Let's weaponize it again in the name of Darkseid. Obviously, Joshua Williamson is a big DC fan. He's a big, student of DC history. So, he's pulling from, past stories, especially seminal stories like the Great Darkness saga. So I think that works on that level. That being said, I do agree with you. It's like, when are we going to get there? The moments here that matter the most, or maybe the moment that matters the most, is seeing those infinite Earths come out of the hand of Pariah at the end. And yeah, what's so interesting is we talked about Flashpoint Beyond event going on, and that's not even, I mean, it's so self-contained. I don't even know if you really call it an event, but going on at the same time as the Dark Crisis. And what's the DC universe going to look like after this? What are they trying to do? And it is so interesting, and we'll talk about Flashpoint Beyond, the latest issue, in just a little bit. And maybe they're purposely having them come out in the same week because they're definitely tying into each other in some unexpected ways. So, how much is Joshua Williamson collaborating with Jeff Johns and Jeremy Adams and Tim Sheridan? I don't know. I can't answer that question. But it is interesting to see what can come of this. But I do agree with you. It does still feel like we're getting set up. We do get a really cool fight between the Secret Society of Supervillains and the Legion of Doom. Legion of Doom ends up getting infected with the Great Darkness, as you mentioned. We get some. You didn't mention this, but something's wrong with magic in the DCU. We see that is a big thing, and there's rumors that the big event next year for DC is going to be all magic related. Maybe they're going to try to reset the way magic works in the DC universe. I'm not really sure. Maybe that's in anticipation of a Justice League Dark movie finally getting off the ground. Again, I don't know. But I am, like, if I take this issue just in a vacuum and just look at the individual moments in terms of, you talked extensively about the scene between Alan Scott and Nightwing. I thought that was very well done. I think Alan Scott doesn't get enough credit for what an interesting character and an important character he is. He's a character, man. I would love to own an Alan Scott first appearance, but I don't happen to have $250,000 laying around.
Exactly, a little expensive.
Yeah, All American Comic 16 from 1940, and yeah, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. But he is so important, and I feel like he has been underutilized so like for a long, long time. So it's great to see him here, and the more Alan Scott we can get, in my mind, the better, because I just think he's such a great character, and I really enjoy the Earth 2 version of him as well. So that whole scene, that whole moment, seeing Alan Scott here, and hopefully it feels like Joshua Williamson is a big fan of Alan Scott as well, and we'll see more of Alan Scott going forward. I certainly hope so. The battle I already mentioned between the Society and the Legion was great. Pariah, those moments of the infinite Earths flying out of his hand, another great moment. The moment where we find out that magic has been messed up. The only moment that didn't work for me as well was the Flash and Hal Jordan going to this, what looks to be a steampunk world, and
Yeah,
like almost a robotic looking Batman. That
yeah.
didn't.
Apparently, that's Batman's world or something with the world or other Justice
Yeah,
League.
well,
It's
yeah.
weird.
Why would Batman? Yeah, and they mentioned, yeah, this doesn't look like a world that we would think that um, Batman would like. Like, why would he create a world like this? You go. Hal even says to Barry, because he mentioned to Barry earlier, yeah, your dream world was like Leave It to Beaver. You go
Yeah,
retro, and Batman goes Misery. But why is Misery like a clock, like literally clockwork gears in the background?
yeah,
And when Batman shows up, he's throwing gears, and he looks like he's in some sort of steampunk uh, costume. So yeah, not sure why that would be Batman's go to if he could have his wish. But I suppose it'll be explained next issue. So yeah, there's a lot of great moments, but unfortunately, it is still set up, like you said, and the sum of the whole is not equal to how fun each individual part is, at least not yet.
yeah,
So I'm wondering how the heck is this? Because if we're still in setup, like I don't even necessarily know what the stakes are, other than we've been told time and again that the stakes are higher than they've ever been. But we've only been told; we haven't been shown. It
yeah.
hasn't even really been explained. I mean, we're over halfway through, and we just now get this hint that there's somebody that's weaponizing the Great Darkness. Like, how does this all come together in only 3 more issues? I have no idea.
Yeah, well, I suspect that it's not going to end in 3 issues, which is going to lead to criticism because I can't see this wrapping up in 3 issues, to be honest. And
Yeah,
and
yeah, it's going to be like I said earlier with the whole Infinite Frontier thing, where that led into, was it Justice Incarnate, and then that led into, I can't even remember what.
yeah, I mean, and it should be. Actually, we'll be getting that into another issue, but I just one of my criticisms as well I was hoping it would work, but it hasn't. It hasn't landed for me. Is the World Without a Justice League series? It just feels like such a really tenuous connection. apparently all the Justice League, they're not really dead. They're on their own worlds, and they're whatever they're doing. And the premise is wrong. These are not actually the dream worlds. What that mean? You're not going to convince me that these were the the dream come true for all these Justice League heroes, the worlds that they're on. It just doesn't fly. There's flawed. They're flawed worlds. And I don't understand how is going to power up Pariah's machines. It's not been very clear. It hasn't been well done. The stories don't seem to be related or consistent with each other in a way that makes it feel cohesive. And it's in that respect, and especially since we've read ahead, and I know the Wonder Woman one is just, oh my god, it's just really really unfortunate. I know Joshua Williamson was saying that he's collaborating with the writers on those stories, or he's aware of them, but I just don't really see a lot of evidence of collaboration. It's just not working very well for me. It just, but I guess it is what it is. But we'll see. I mean, I've been enjoying this so far, and I'm giving Joshua Williamson all the rope he needs. And I don't think he's going to hang himself. I enjoy this. I'm a sucker for a good crisis. I'm a DC lover. I love a good crisis. And I've nitpicked every crisis there's ever been. So this one's no different. So, we'll see how this ends up.
Yeah, do you remember what came after Justice League Incarnate? Because we had Infinite Frontier series, and then we had the Justice League Incarnate series. That ended in March. Was there another miniseries that we got
No, well, we
before?
had, Infinite Frontier and Justice League Incarnate. And
Okay, it was just two. Then we had
yeah,
Death
just
of
two.
Justice League.
That's
What
right.
was that?
Then we had Death of Justice League
Okay.
75, yeah. And then we had this,
Yeah.
Dark Crisis.
For some reason, I was thinking there was a third miniseries, but I guess not. So
Yeah, no.
yeah. But one thing I will say is, even if the story wasn't I mean, it's not working as good as it could be. I think that's what Rock and I are saying.
Yeah.
We're both fans of Joshua Williamson. He's definitely upped his game. He definitely loves the DC universe. He's definitely a student of it, much like Jeff Johns is, and he's mining from a lot of seminal stories, like I said before. But it does feel like there's some potential that's going by the wayside here. That being said, I cannot stress enough how amazing the Daniel Sampere artwork is. And I don't just mean in line work, in composition, in the rendering that he's doing, because all that is top notch. But his storytelling has gotten to be incredible. And it wasn't like that ever was a weakness for him. And I've talked to him. I've said it on the podcast so many times. When I really feel like he upped his game was that Justice League annual he did during Scott Snyder's run. And like I said, I've talked to him about that. That's when he had done stuff for DC for years previous, for like 5 years. I think he'd been doing things here and there, never a regular on the series, but fill in one shots, that sort of thing, an issue here or there, some covers. But that issue made me like sit up and take notice of him. And I've told him that, and he said that he felt when he got that assignment, that was his big shot. It was a high profile gig. Scott Snyder's Justice League. It was a big part of the story of what Scott was doing there, and he just killed himself on that book, and it really really showed. And from there, he did the Future State Aquaman story that Rock and I both enjoyed and raved about, and I feel like that his storytelling in that, because it being so ethereal underwater, the color work that was done, he the storytelling needed to be top notch. Just in terms of transitions from panel to panel, he leveled up. Then he got Action Comics, and the story that Philip Kennedy Johnson has been telling in Action Comics, as we've covered it, has been really epic in scope. So again, Daniel needed to bring his A game and really concentrate on the storytelling and really exercise that muscle. And that has only continued in Dark Crisis,
Mm-hmm.
especially with such a large cast of characters. And just page after page, I'm nearly pulled out of the story because his line work is so fantastic. The choices that he makes in terms of how to lay the panels out, right from the start, when Barry shows up and he's talking to Hal, just the choice to put Barry running through those 4 different worlds. We see Superman, we see Wonder Woman, we see Green Arrow and Black Canary. I'm not sure who the third panel is, with the tentacle face. But I love that Flash is running through there. And then when we have the conversation on the next page between Mr. Terrific and Cyborg and Donna Troy and Wildcat, like the background that's there, the line work, the way everybody's standing, their body language, um, having that framed by scenes of what the heroes are doing in the world right now with all these disasters that are going on. The way he backlights, uh, the choice to backlight Nightwing when Alan Scott is standing behind him with his ring glowing. It's, and again, a lot of this goes to the color work as well, which is done really, really well. By Alejandro Sanchez, who Daniel works with a lot. But that green glow of the ring illuminating Garth as he lays there in bed wrapped in bandages, illuminating Alan Scott's face, illuminating Nightwing's face. It's so well done. It's so beautiful to look at. And then, okay, hey, these are all great expositional moments that could become boring in the hands of a lesser artist. He's keeping it interesting for us, but that doesn't mean we don't get action. No, we have that incredible battle between the Legion of Doom and the Society, and that double page spread that has panels inset along the bottom. Like, I can't name most of those characters, and they look a little different than they normally would. Even Prometheus, and Deathstroke, they've got the chains around him. Particularly the woman on the left. Like, I see Dr. Phosphorus there, but the woman on the left with the heart glasses. Do you know who that is?
I
With the
don't
double
actually.
pistols.
I don't.
Yeah,
I don't know who that is.
I don't know who that is either, but my point is, like, all of these characters, regardless of like I can recognize all of them or not, they all look badass. Even somebody as silly as Typhoon,
Yeah.
he's flying. We see, God, he was just in the Aquaman series. He's dressed in that deep sea. I can't remember, but he's such a Z-list villain, and we see
Devil
him
Ray or
there.
something or what?
No, it's not Devil. The guy that wore the deep sea suit. He's right there next to Prometheus. I cannot for the life of me
Oh,
remember his name.
yeah, I can't
But
remember.
that guy's such a joke villain. But even he
Yeah,
looks formidable here, um,
yeah,
and that's the power of Daniel Samper. Like, he's just doing such a fantastic job. Seeing Pariah's face as the great darkness that he's weaponizing is corrupting him. I mean, it all works. Walking the heroes following Alan Scott down the stairs. Again, that green glow of the ring as they descend to sort of the magical headquarters of the Justice League Dark. Like, it just choice after choice by Daniel. And again, I give some credit to Joshua Williamson as well, because he's probably telling or at least hinting toward Daniel Samper, hey, this is what I'm thinking for this panel. But I'm sure Daniel has plenty of freedom to illustrate as he would like. But I'm so impressed by Daniel Samper, and we've said, especially when we were talking about that Future State Aquaman series, that hey, this is a superstar in the making. This is superstar art. Like, he's no longer a superstar in making; he's a superstar. Like, this art is incredible. When you think about DC events over the past 10 or 15, 20 years, and incredible art. Obviously, you go back further than that, you think George Perez, um, but you come forward a little bit, and it's Ivan Reis, who you think of, who is just synonymous with that DC style. When I'm going to think of events in the past few years, I'm going to think of this. I'm going to think of this style. I'm going to think of this line work. I'm going to think of Daniel Samper, because his art, like, I can't say enough about how incredible it is. It's just so good. And this is the best issue he's done yet, and it's what really made me love this. Does the story have some holes, and is it, like I said, possibly wasting some potential? Yes, but the art more than makes up for it in my mind. So, absolutely fantastic.
yeah. And just a quick point. At one point, Mister Terrific says in this issue that the idea of the omniverse was false, and that it created an imbalance in our multiverse. And so, the idea of the omniverse is false. I can't help but sort of chuckle when I read that, with both uh, irony and a little bit of frustration, because all the talk of the DC Omniverse and everything matters and everything else, and now the idea. I mean, it's word for word. That's what he says. The idea of the Omniverse is false. Really? So
I loved that. I loved that. That put a big smile on my face when I read that at the beginning. It's like, I get it. I've talked before about Scott Snyder and how his ideas are great, but there's not always enough real estate on the page. I talked extensively about that, both during Death Metal or Dark Knights Dark Knights and Dark Knights Death Metal. That I just think the ideas were too big. They weren't
yeah,
able to be fleshed out in the real estate they had, and again, they weren't line wide events. So as soon as I read that, and I'm like, okay, they're trying to pull back on that idea. The way Scott always
Yeah.
described it, if you saw him at a show or went to one of his panels, is this idea of the DC universe as a fishbowl, and you dump that fishbowl back you take that fishbowl and you dump it in the ocean. It's a much bigger world.
Yeah.
It's too big. It's too big in my mind. That's too much. That's you got to put some constraints on it to make things make sense, especially continuity wise. So I never really as much as I'm a fan of Scott Snyder, I never really liked that idea. And so they're walking that back. Like when I saw that, I was like, yes. And we'll get to more of it. Flashpoint Beyond talks something similar
Yeah.
in this week as well. So I love that idea. Hey,
Yeah. Well, and
the
Mr.
idea of an
Terrific.
omniverse was a lie. Hey, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Mr. Terrific also says, I can't believe I'm about to say this, but the smart thing here is to hope for the best. I agree with you, Mr. Terrific. We are all hoping for the best with this series, and we're certainly going to stick with it, and we'll see where it leads us.
Yeah, I mean, this if they're rolling back the idea of the omniverse, and again, we'll talk about it more when we get to Flashpoint Beyond, because it might be this idea of it's not an omniverse, it's back to being a multiverse, but it's not 52 worlds as we see at the end of this issue. It's back to infinite worlds. That sort of is in the middle of what Scott Snyder was trying to do, and what we had ever since Flashpoint Beyond, or
Yeah.
New 52 if you want, with establishing the 52 worlds. It's kind of a nice middle ground. But what it does allow for is, yeah, all the stories can count, but only in their own particular worlds. So it's less of a have your cake and eat it too, and it's less of the everything matters, because as we both have said, if everything matters, then nothing matters, because everything can be erased and contradicted, and why should we be investing our time? So
Yeah.
I like that. When I read that line, I was like, yes, the omniverse. I never liked that idea. Get rid of it, throw it away. I don't even like the idea of there being a dark multiverse.
Yeah.
I would be happy if that went away as well. And if it took
I agree.
the Batman that laughs with it forever, that would be even better. I know that's not going to happen because he's a moneymaker for DC, but God, what a horrible character.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, let's move on. Multiversity, Team Justice #4, written by Danny Lore and Ivan Cohen, art by Marco Failla, colors by Enrica Aaron Angiolini, letters by Carlos M. Manguel. Will to Survive for this particular issue, #4 of 6, I think this is. What'd you think?
Uh, it's all right. I'm not really really on board with the story, if I'm brutally honest, but this story has gotten better. It's gotten better. It's finally, we're actually, we're in issue 4, and we're actually knee deep in the action. Uh this, I guess, what is it? Troy? His name's Troy. Why don't they just call him Don Troy? But no, his name's Troy. Uh, uh, they rescue Troy. Gets captured by the Sinestra and the rest of the Green Lanterns, which are, I guess, evil, and uh, a lot of it's called like I said, it's called Will to Survive. I'm not even sure what that's a reference to, if that's a reference to the Green Lanterns or what, but obviously it what writers Danny Lore and Ivan Cohen do here is, the good thing is that in this issue, Teen Justice come together as a team. There's a lot of teamwork, and they end up while they end up. I mean, this is still a build-up. They end up getting defeated in some respects, but they do come together as a team, and they fight for each other. They defend each other. I would have. Um, I still would like to see more of the members of the actual Justice Guild in this comic, because I know the Justice Guild, everything's gender swapped. This is Earth 11. I would have. I know this is a Teen Justice comic. I know that, but I would like to see the Justice Guild. I'm more interested in the Justice Guild than in the Teen Justice. But I would, if I think that because Teen Justice are the children in large part, sort of like the legacy characters of the Justice Guild on Earth 11. I would like to see the Justice Guild have more of come in more into play here, because this is the Teen Justice that they fight and they bicker a lot, and to the point where it got a little annoying maybe at different scenes in the first 3 issues, but they're coming into their own here, and they're finally putting aside their arguing, and when the push comes to shove, they manage to pull through. I'm not uh I'm not entirely clear exactly what's at stake or what's going on, if I'm brutally honest, because it feels like it's been a long time since the last issue. But there's some interesting characters here. I like what they did with the Green Lantern Corps. It's a little bit different, um, but I don't really have didn't really didn't really captivate me. I I have to say about with DC in general, between Teen Titans Academy and Teen Justice, this is definitely this is far better than Teen Titans Academy ever was. At least we're getting some we're getting some teenage action here for these heroes. I uh, Frankly, I wanted it to be mainstream DC universe, and this Earth 11 for these characters that are, I mean, Danny Lauren, Ivan Korn they're doing a decent job telling this story. It's just I'm not really pulled in by the characters. I I'm just not pulled in. I'm not really I don't feel invested in the story, and maybe that's just me, but I don't really feel that I in 4 issues, we've gotten a there's been a lot of story crammed into 4 issues here, and to Ivan Cohen and Danny Lore's credit, they've crammed in a lot of character work with a lot of dialogue, a lot of character work. Maybe it's just because none of these characters really resonate with me, but I can't fault them for not doing some character work because they have. There is character work to be had here. I just don't really none of the characters really have really grabbed me yet, and maybe that's just going to take some time. And the fact that whenever I hear a reference of the Justice Guild, I want to see the Justice Guild play a role here because I think that I remember that there was that initially when were first introduced to the Teen Justice Guild. It was in a backup story to some I can't remember to some DC one shot, and the Justice Guild was actually in it, and the interplay between the Justice Guild and the Teen Justice, I actually enjoyed that the most. I wish I'd like to see that myself. But I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I feel exactly the same way. There's been character work, but it is a very I don't want to say convoluted story, but it's an action packed story with a lot of moving parts, multiple plot threads that have come together. But being that I don't know these characters and not invested in any of them, I do find it a little harder to follow. And maybe that's on me. Maybe, like you said, I just need to go back and reread it once it's all said and done. This is I enjoyed this issue more than any previous issue. I thought it was done really really well. It is starting to come together, and as much as they bicker, like you said, which is an interesting choice for characters that aren't that well known. Um, but I suppose it does come across as somewhat realistic based on the fact that they're teenagers. Um, but yeah, there's been a lot of story crammed in here. And being that I'm not familiar with the characters, I'm not invested. That it's the perfect way that you put it. So I'm not pulled in. Um, so maybe I'm sort of lacking that relatable point to really have the story grab me. So yeah, it definitely has improved, and it feels like it's all going to come together in the end. And it's maybe one of those situations where it's going to read better as a whole as opposed to this individual monthly issues. So okay. Up next, we have New Champion of Shazam. This is chapter number 2, written by Josie Campbell. Art is by Evan Doc Shaner. Lettering by Becca Carey. And what can I say? I love this. I do miss overall stories of the Shazam family and stories of Billy Batson. But if only one of them gets to have powers, I think Mary is an excellent choice just because she's such a complicated character. And I know that people might push back on that a little and say, no, she's just like kind of a smarty pants, a goody two shoes, if you will, somebody you would expect to be the hall monitor. And yeah, she's had some of those character traits in the past, but that's what makes this work, right? You put somebody like that who's confident and thinks they have all the answers, and all of a sudden you throw them in the deep end where they're in over their head. They don't have their adoptive brothers and sisters to back them up like they've had in the past, and all of a sudden you have a really big conflict for Mary, where she doesn't know what she's going to do. She realizes she doesn't have it all figured out, and it's really challenging for her. On top of that, you get Evan Doc Shaner, who, in my mind, is the best person to ever draw any sort of Shazam or Shazam family story because of sort of the inherent innocence that comes with his style of art, which really harkens back to the actual Fawcett days of Shazam or Captain Marvel back when CC Beck used to draw it. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that Doc Shaner's art looks like CC Beck. It's much more modern with lighter line weights and has much more of a modern sensibility. But there is also this cleanliness to his line work that really works for a Shazam type story. So this is sort of the best mixing of a modern aesthetic with sort of classic superhero stories. And the other thing that's great about what Josie Campbell is giving us is this is a wonderful story for, maybe ages 8 to 12 to introduce them to something in the DC Comics universe because it's relatively self-contained. There's not a lot of violence. It's certainly cartoonish violence. And again, it has that feeling of innocence and wonder and kind of classic superhero storytelling. So I can't say enough about beyond the aesthetic that Doc Shaner uses, his storytelling, his line work, the textures in his art, the comedic looks on the faces, or even the comedic moments in the fight when Mary's fighting this giant, I don't know, like flying crocodile type monster and whacks her with his tail. This is just a lot of fun. And Josie Campbell's story has some mystery and some intrigue and some emotion. And yeah, this is just working for me on all cylinders. I think that it has surpassed my expectations. I mean, I knew when Doc Shaner on a Mary Shazam book, a Mary Marvel book, I was in, but I didn't know necessarily what to expect. But this has the story itself, what Josie Campbell has done has really impressed me. So, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I echo your sentiment. I just want to emphasize, and I don't think you were trying to suggest. In fact, I know you weren't trying to suggest that this is just for 8 to 10 year olds.
No, not at all.
Because it's certainly it's this is perfect. This is the perfect comic because uh, this is written for adults that children can enjoy. Which is I say that's the perfect superhero comic that it should be written for adults that children can read and want to read and enjoy because this is great storytelling. This is great art. And there's a lot of really great character work here. I mean, Mary Marvel, I mean, look, Shazam's been a mess. I mean, let's face it, coming out of Future State, I mean, Shazam was just very poorly handled, and it was just a mess trying to make sense of that. And all people need to know is that the power of Shazam, thank God, get it away from Billy. If you don't know how to rate Billy, fine, give it to Mary. Give the power of Shazam to Mary Marvel. That's what Billy Batson did, gave the power of Shazam to Mary. And what underscores the character moments here between Mary and the other members of the Marvel family, Darla, Eugene, Pedro, and Freddy, is that there's not enough power of Shazam to go around. It's only, Mary Marvel has it all, and she it seems to be focused in her. She can't share it. And that creates some tension with Darla and Eugene and Pedro and we haven't, I don't think we've seen Freddy yet, but it's it's clear that there's probably some hurt feelings there because they don't, Mary doesn't know what's going on with the powers and what, because I mean and again, Billy just sort of took off and is speaking through a rabbit, the actual bunny talking base, sends a bunny to talk to Mary to say, by the way, you got the powers of Shazam. I mean, there's some ludicrous sort of plot points in that, but they're fun and it works. It actually works. And it's kind of the stuff that you would expect. And like you said, it sort of harkens back to the Silver Age nonsense, but it possesses enough verisimilitude that it pulls the reader in, and it's helped out all the more by Doc Shaner's amazing art that, like you said, just captures the innocence of Mary Marvel and Darla and her character moments, and it really does work well. And in particular, at the end, she continues to go to university, and of course she gets sidestepped because there's a kind of a crocodile creature that's loose. Well, this crocodile creature must be tied to these three unknown, or these three odd looking, uh, almost like they look like shadow characters that that Mary has a hard time defeating, because they have like almost electrical powers that they connect like a conduit, and so whenever she tries to use her Captain Marvel or her lightning powers, they can utilize, they can create a, I guess, a conduit and sort of use her own powers against her. It's a little unclear what their power set is, but it's they have an opportunity, these three literally dark shadow looking characters that have lightning powers of their own. They have the at one point near the end, they have the ability to incapacitate Mary Marvel, but they choose not to. So I'm not even clear what I like that. Are they bad guys? Are they good guys? What's their agenda? We don't know. Again, it's a great way to end the comic. It's a great way, great character moments leading to like, hey, who are these three people? What's going on? Mary herself. We the readers feel like Mary Marvel does here, Mary Bromfield, because we're just as much in the dark as Mary is. And that's a hard thing to pull off for some writers, but they've managed to do it, because we're just as much in the dark as Mary is, because we're wondering, Billy, why did you give her the Shazam powers? What's going on? So we got the same questions Mary does. Who are these three that showed up at the end? So just very well done. And sadly, you know what? This is too, I want this to go beyond. I already know I want this to be longer than 4 issues, because this is better than most of what I'm reading. Well, at least it's better than 50-60% of what I'm reading at DC right now in terms of just sheer entertainment. And again, dare I say, there's that word again, hope. I mean, this is just literally filled with it. And it's a really good read.
Yeah, I agree. And again, to Rocky's point, definitely, I certainly didn't mean that it was only for 8 to 12-year-olds or whatever, because there are some sophisticated ideas here. But my point is, it's a very good gateway comic. Hook them while they're young, something you can share with your kids,
Yeah.
and not worry about any kind of mature themes that don't work on that level. All right. Up next, we have Nubia, Queen of the Amazons. This is issue number 4 of 4. For whatever reason, our preview copy doesn't have the credits inside, but I think I know. Written by Stephanie Williams. We know that. Aletha Martinez does pencils. We have two people on inks, Mark Morales and John Livesey. And then Alex Guillermis does the color work, and Becca Carey is on letters. So I guess save the best for last. This was the best issue of this series. It felt like action packed and kind of what the series should have been all along. It's very much been a talking head series up to this point, sort of a political series, really giving us the background of who Queen Nubia was before she became Queen Nubia. And it does plant some seeds going forward, even though she's forced to kill her former ally, I guess, or tribe member, Zilla. I don't know exactly what to call her. But there is a climactic battle between Nubia and Zilla. And obviously Zilla knew Nubia, previously Princess Zahava, before she died and came to the Well of Souls. But it appears that Hera, and I'm not sure who the other god is because it's not even named, and that did bother me. That is a nitpick. If you're not reading the regular Wonder Woman title, you're like, wait, who are these people? What's going on with the gods? But it looks like they're going to resurrect Zilla and use her in some way, and it's to be continued in the pages of Wonder Woman, which I sort of feel like it should be, because it is so tied in with who Wonder Woman is and the Amazon. So again, I just wish that we'd gotten this level of action throughout, because I think it's been so political and such a talking head series that it sort of lost some of its momentum. So it's in a way, it's not so different from a lot of what Rocky and I felt about the Wonder Woman corner of the DC universe lately, which is a little bit of potential wasted. And I can sort of sum it up, even though I did enjoy this issue, I can sort of sum it up very easily in that early on in the issue, Nubia is thinking back to when she went to the god Samet, much like Zilla is doing, and was looking for power. Nubia even acknowledged she's being sort of hypocritical, and we see Nubia there. This is when she originally got the amulet, when she's still Princess Zahava, and the god tests her and tests her by having her bitten by a snake. But it's this inset panel. It's the final panel on lower right panel on a page, and she gets bit. Right. We don't even see the bite take place. All we get is a hiss,
I noticed that
and
too. Yeah.
what we see of Nubia is from the waist up. And then on the next page, or the next, yeah, I guess the next page, the next panel, we see her calf there, and it's got a couple bite marks. But even that is not really clear. Like I had to look. Like I knew, obviously, with the hiss, you're like, okay, she got bit by something. But I had to wait. I was like, wait, am I supposed to see a snake in this panel? I don't even see a snake. The words say the venom now coursing through your veins, and there's the two holes. There's where she got bit. Like again, it's just I don't know exactly why Aletha Martinez would make that choice. Maybe she was directed by Stephanie Williams, but it's almost like it's trying to be a little too clever, and it's missing the forest for the trees in a way. So in my mind, that little sequence, those two panels, kind of sum up. As much as I enjoyed this, as much as it was a satisfying conclusion, this whole entire series could have been better if it wasn't trying so hard. Just you have an interesting character. You've done good character work on her in the past. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. Just kind of trust yourself and tell a good story. And we got the bones of a good story here. And again, this is the best of the series. But now it's over, and now it's going to fold into Wonder Woman, which again I think is a good thing. But I'd be lying if I didn't say that I think overall the series could have been a lot better. So, what are your thoughts, Rock?
Yeah, this is this is better than the first. This as a story, this worked. It ended on a higher note than the first Nubia series did, and I still got some criticisms here, but I will say that that we we have more of an origin for Nubia. I she was this princess thousands of years ago in Madagascar, and she apparently in the past this goddess Semet or Sekhmet or however you say it gave her. That's where she ended up with this amulet, and the amulet got separated, and then this Zila character ends up putting the amulet together and is very powerful now. And Zila is now fights Nubia in this issue, and I was a little surprised. I'm admittedly I'm a little confused. I thought Zila would be more powerful because she was bragging about if she has the amulet, she's going to have all this power, and she's not that powerful. I don't really know what the big deal was with this amulet. Okay, so she's not particularly powerful, and she's and then Nubia kills her. And am I am I should I be surprised by that? I mean, look, Wonder Woman killed Maxwell Lord, snapped his neck, but that was a big event. Now Nubia, I guess Nubia has no problem using lethal force. I'm actually openly wondering, why did Nubia feel the need to kill Zilla? Was it necessary? I don't think it was necessary, but I get it. Oh, okay, I get it. I mean, frankly, that's a very Amazonian thing to do. Amazons ought to kill more, to be blunt, if they're actually true to their code. To be honest, with the whole peaceful warrior thing, I like that she killed Zila. To be honest, I find it a little interesting that if Zila's dead, now she's resurrected, presumably resurrected by Hera and this other black goddess who is, as you said, unidentified. A huge misstep not identifying who that other goddess is. Presumably, it's somebody who's just as duplicitous and engaging in machinations as Hera is. But like I said, the bare bones of a story, they're here. And what I like about it is that there's potential stuff to story plot elements here to build upon. We still don't know a lot about the amulet. We still don't know. I think that the Zilla character can be infinitely more interesting because ultimately there was far too much talking, far too much dialogue. This could have been a much shorter. This could have been done in 2 issues instead of 4. Um, but again, we're getting, we got something here. We got something here, and I actually, I I'm actually curious to see where this is, when Zila comes back and she's resurrected. Hera is clearly up to something. And I guess my only concern is that I I just feel things still feel so incomplete, and they don't feel particularly cohesive between all the Wonder Woman titles. Individually, I find that they're all messy. And Nubia, I will say to Stephanie Williams, while I can be critical of it, I actually think this Nubia is actually probably the most coherent story out of all of them between Wonder Woman and all the other, and the Artemis One Shot and Wanted, and that's been a mess, and the Trial of the Amazons. So Stephanie Williams here has actually, I like the fact that she sort of reeled it in here, and we got a, I guess, a decent story out of it. I'd like to see where it goes though, and I guess I guess we're gonna have to continue to read Wonder Woman to figure out what's gonna happen with this resurrected Zila now and this new Black Goddess working with Hera.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And again, much like Yara Flor, it's a little bit of potential wasted. So,
Yeah.
okay, up next, we teased it. Now it's here. Flashpoint Beyond, issue number 4. Such a fantastic series. Written by Jeff Johns, Tim Sheridan, and Jeremy Adams. Zermanico and Mikel Yanin are the artists. Romulo Fajardo Jr. and Jordi Belair do the colors. Rob Lee on letters. And yeah, I thought this was so interesting the way it kicks off. Also with Mr. Terrific, talking about the Omniverse and the fact that it really doesn't exist the way that that we were told it was. The Omniverse is a lie. So, what were your thoughts?
uh, yeah, well, the first thing is, because this is the Flashpoint universe, the big mystery is, how does this Flashpoint universe still exist? We don't really get answers to that yet, although presumably at some point we will. But I do find one of the things that I found very, very different between this, and if I'm comparing this to Dark Crisis number 4, is what stood out to me anyway, is the description of the Great Darkness, because the Great Darkness is described here by, this starts off with a Dr. Baxter talking to Mr. Terrific, and they're talking about the Omniverse and the multiverse, and the Great Darkness is described here as an ancient living corruption that infects and controls sentient life. And they're having a conversation as if the Dark Crisis already happened, that this Dark Crisis already happened, which is
Well, yeah, if you
interesting.
look at the top. Yeah, if you look at the top right there, it
Yeah,
says the top of
to,
that page, 2 days after the Dark Crisis. So
yeah,
this actually, one thing we've actively wondered about, is how they relate to each other. Yeah, apparently, Dark Crisis ends before Flashpoint Beyond.
yeah, it's really now. Who knows? I mean, with Jeff Johns, with all the time travel shenanigans and space time, maybe this is some kind of misdirection. But I don't think Jeff Johns would do that. He's very, very deliberate, Johns, when he says something. So he's very intentionally setting the ending of Flashpoint Beyond. This where we are, like you said, 2 days after the ending of Dark Crisis. So that's really interesting. But it's also interesting that the Great Darkness is described as something, it's an ancient living corruption. So it's a lot more than a mere shadow or just like a darkness that was suggested in Dark Crisis number 4 that we just finished reviewing. So, and again, maybe I'm making too much of that, but in any event, clearly somebody is corrupting, at a minimum, corrupting and utilizing the Great Darkness. And but in any event, we get some interesting conversations here, which I don't even know if there must be a reason why you know, the conversation with Mr. Terrific and this Dr. Baxter, and she's one of the smartest women in the Flashpoint universe. Mr. Terrific is the third smartest man, and they talk about the Mandela effect, and the Mandela effect being the effect that people who go through a crisis, when they still remember remnants of their past after every crisis, that's considered a Mandela effect. They talk a little bit about the universes and the Rip Hunter, and they show Dr. Manhattan, and it talks about the metaverse, and so there's little hints of everything. And then lo and behold, it shows in our universe, Bruce Wayne meets up with Ra's al Ghul. And Ra's al Ghul's supposed to be dead. So apparently 2 days after the Dark Crisis ends, Ra's al Ghul is alive again. So Ra's al Ghul, we believe, is supposed to be dead, but I guess he's alive. And Ra's al Ghul tells Batman that you can still save your father, Thomas. You can still save him. And okay, well, that's interesting. And so, but how does the Flashpoint universe still exist? And how does this deal with the snow globe? And because at the end of this, the Rip Hunter shows up, the Time Hunter, and one of the Time Masters, Rip Hunter, shows up and sort of warns, Bruce Wayne, don't get involved in this. Stay away. Don't try to rescue your dad, or at least that's what I'm guessing that's what he's basically telling him. Meanwhile, well, Thomas Wayne is trying to piece all this stuff together. Thomas Wayne is ignoring the Penguin. His trusty butler, the Penguin, is trying to tell him to take to go and rescue Dexter, but Dexter and the Penguin's trying to tell him about your son is went to Arkham Asylum, and all this happened. You got to go and rescue him, but Thomas Wayne is still of the mindset that, look, I don't have to do anything because nothing matters. Nothing matters. We got to get rid of this we got to get rid of this Flashpoint universe so that basically our son can, because we don't exist. Nothing matters. But he ends up confronting Martha, who is, of course, his wife Martha is the Joker. And Martha discovered discovered what was the truth and the secrets of the Flashpoint universe, the Flashpoint paradox. She discovered it because one of her cellmates, or one of her fellow inmates at Arkham Asylum, was the Psycho Pirate. And so after Psycho Pirate filled Martha in on the truth of the Flashpoint universe and what the importance of it happening and not existing. And then Psycho Pirate, of course, she ends up killing him and what have you. So we understand that that's why Martha now knows. But now Martha has this secret of she wants to bring her son back. She wants to take Thomas with her and go back in time and to have it so that their son Bruce lives and that they die. At least that's what she's saying. And interesting. How is this all going to resolve itself? I mean, she's the murderer she's the Clockwork Killer. Okay. So what I thought was going to be a lot more complex is actually just kind of a glorified Martha Wayne Joker story, at least. But yet we're going to have the wrinkle here is going to be Bruce Wayne trying to rescue his father, Thomas Wayne, and then actually confronting his mother, who's the Joker in the Flashpoint universe. That we're heading for what is, I'm sure, is going to be a very interesting collision between all these characters. And how is it going to resolve? I don't really know, but it's very interesting that this takes place 2 days after the end of Dark Crisis, because will Flashpoint Batman end up back in our universe along with Martha, the Joker, Martha Wayne? Will the Flashpoint universe continue to exist? It's hard to say, because if this is 2 days after the Dark Crisis and the Dark Crisis is over, well, this Flashpoint universe still exists. So if the Dark Crisis is over, well, then it's definitely going to continue to exist. So I got a lot of questions. I'm kind of confused, but all in a good way. I love I love the art here. The art was really good. I love Martha Wayne. I mean, the characterization is kind of predictable. Every time every time it goes back to Bruce Wayne in our universe, we always get the Mikel Janon's art. And so clearly now it's great to see the Time Master Rip Hunter step up to the plate, wanting to prevent Batman from doing whatever Batman feels he needs to do. And so lots of questions, but I got so many theories going through my head, but I'm looking forward. Hopefully people who are listening, if you have any theories, feel free to share them on the comments section, those watching on YouTube. And so what do you think of this?
Yeah, it definitely, again, feels like they're trying to put the genie back in the bottle. The Omniverse doesn't exist. It's an infinite multiverse. It feels like that's what we're headed toward, and how that could all work with continuity. I don't know. Can we just make Joshua Williamson editor-in-chief or continuity guy? He doesn't need to write everything, but, it would be nice. It would be nice if we could get back to that point with some tighter continuity. One of the things I found interesting is that globe that's been such a big part of the story apparently contains the Flashpoint um, universe. You know, you didn't mention that, but we see
Ah, that's right. Yeah.
when Martha Wayne kisses the globe, you know, we see it on the other side. Um, that Bruce in the actual DC universe sees the so who put the Flashpoint universe in that globe? Was it the Time Hunters? Is it somebody else manipulating things? We don't know. But yeah, so many questions. You know, what's going to happen? Thomas Wayne Batman is such an interesting character and a popular character. Wasn't surprised to see him come back in Tom King's run of Batman. Wasn't surprised to hear about Flashpoint Beyond and a series focused on him. So would be a little surprised if they really do get rid of him and get rid of the Flashpoint universe. Like I could see them destroying the Flashpoint universe. Maybe they'll make it part of the multiverse. Who knows? Um, but yeah, I mean, you make a good point about this being a universe that's not supposed to exist. So does that mean that all those things that Mr. Terrific was saying about the Omniverse when he's on that program in the Flashpoint universe aren't actually true? They're true for the Flashpoint universe, but not for our own universe. So yeah, there's still plenty of questions to be answered, but it does. I get the feeling, I get the tone that Joshua Williamson and Jeff Johns are both working toward rolling back what Scott did. I think DC just realized it wasn't a good idea to make things that wide open. You know, this whole idea of everything matters. It hasn't worked. I mean, let's just be honest. So but fantastic artwork by Zermanico and Mikel Yanin. Absolutely love it. And yeah, no surprise that Ra's al Ghul is back. You know, he even says himself, yeah, my return, you're not surprised. Nobody's surprised. Um, does this mean that after the Flashpoint or after Dark Crisis that it is somewhat of a reset of the timeline? I guess we'll have to wait. We'll have to wait and see. So,
Yeah.
okay. Up next, we have Poison Ivy #4. This is written by G. Willow Wilson. This is issue 4 of 6. The art is by Marcio Takara. Arif Prianto does the colors. The letters by Hassan Otsman Elhau. Rocky and I both talked about when we got the first issue of this series, and certainly into the second, was just how brutal Poison Ivy was, and we speculated on whether she was returning to her villainous roots. She's killing people left and right. How do you reconcile that with her, persona with in this relationship with Harley Quinn? And to her credit, G. Willow Wilson has done a good job of making that a very meta part of this series, to the point that Poison Ivy, Pamela Isley, is asking herself those same questions. She wants to defend the planet. She sees all the harm that humans are doing. She herself is dying, and she wants to save the planet. She wants to, reduce the number of humans on the planet so that the planet, the natural or nature world, the ecosystem of nature on planet Earth can heal itself. And that she sees this as her legacy. If she wasn't dying, maybe she wouldn't be headed down this path. But that being said, even though she's doing this, even though she knows she's dying and wants to leave this lasting legacy, she's still questioning her own decisions. She's asking those same questions we were asking. Should she be killing people? Should she be doing this? Isn't this a betrayal of Harley and all that sort of thing? And this is what happens in this issue when um, we see her. She goes to work at like an Amazon type place, and she's infecting the packages with spores because she knows that the packages get shipped all over the world. And the boss that works there sexually harasses his employees, and he's pretty much just a creep. And so she takes him out. She gives him his just desserts, and then one of the women that works at the plant, they have a sexual and intimate sexual encounter, and she's Poison Ivy sort of overwhelmed with the moment, but even then she feels some guilt about what she's doing. Like I said, to other humans, but also what she's doing, quote unquote, cheating on Harley. Um, she never stops loving Harley, and again, all the same questions that we would be asking, or that thoughts we would be thinking. Pamela Poison Ivy is thinking herself. So it's a very meta issue, and it's perfect characterization in my mind. So um, I'm still not a huge fan of the Takara art. I think it's just a little messy. It sort of works for the fungal stuff, but I don't know. I don't know. I wouldn't want, like a Jim Lee house style of art on this either. I think you can find a happy medium. Um, but the other part of it is that the color work tends to be a little darker from Arif Prianto. And I think the reason that he's going for a little bit of a darker, or almost a muted palette, is because of the Takara line work. And I would appreciate a brighter color palette, just because everything seems to have this grayish filter over it. And I understand why, because this almost comes across at times as like this body horror book. Whenever we see poison ivy sort of plant out, if you will, with the fungal infection and what have you. But again, just not my favorite style of art. But character wise, I can't I can't fault it at all. And it, like, I know she doesn't do interiors, but if you look at the Jenny Frison cover for this issue, which is absolutely beautiful, like something more along the lines of that on the interiors, I think I would enjoy a lot more. I mean, that's just a beautiful cover. So anyway, what are your thoughts on this one?
I thought it was story wise it was okay. It was okay. I would have liked. I thought it was again maybe it's I thought it was really the whole. I mean every single issue we've had an evil man, and now we got one who sexually harasses her, and of course he dies horribly, and he she makes sure he dies horribly, and of course, everyone's glad. I guess we're supposed to be glad that she murders another person, and then decides to have sex afterwards after killing this man who, of course, he's scum because he sexually harasses people in the workplace, and he's a real he's a real piece of work. Um, but it's kind of it's interesting because he's still, I mean, and it's so on the one hand, it's kind of tropey and a little predictable. On the other hand, I kind of let it go a little bit because J. Willow Wilson is she's not she's making it clear that Poison Ivy, she's still a killer. She's a killer. And of course, I personally, you know, uh, she should she actually killed a couple of I mean even there was a couple of farm landowners that she killed in issue 2 who they couldn't just be landowners. They were landowners that had to say something insulting to her, or they had to say something sexually derogatory. I mean, you know, I think that there's I find it interesting that on the one hand, well, she's not really a killer, but the people that she kills, even though it's wrong to kill them, these were really jerks. It's like, I'm still inclined to think, and I know this was this has to be intentional on J. Willow Wilson's part, and that's kind of why I like it. Is well, this is still a kick-ass murdering woman. This woman is psychopathic. She's a murderer. She is actually working at an Amazon plant to spread a virus to wipe out humanity. And she decides while she's there to kill the boss, who is sexually harassing another coworker, who she ends up sleeping with herself at the end of this.
Yeah, but
story.
The woman comes on. You said she decides to have sex. She doesn't decide to have sex. This woman basically just.
Well, she
I don't want
decides
to
to
say
have sex. It was
acts like that.
consensual. She certainly
Yeah.
decided, and there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, I get
Well,
it.
but again, to be very meta, she herself, Ivy herself mentions while she's feeling a little guilty about having sex with this woman when she still has feelings for, she says I love Harley. She talks about the fact that when she uses her powers, especially to the extent she uses them to take this boss out, that it leaves her somewhat in a daze. So I mean, it could be problematic. You think about it. It's certainly not a date rape situation. It is consensual, but she maybe isn't thinking as clearly as she could. Also, the other thing I wonder about, you bring up a good point. She's in the American South, and G. Willow Wilson is sort of pulling no punches in terms of, yeah, the landowners down there, everybody being insulting and kind of scumbags, and she's certainly saying something about it, sort of tongue in cheek, I suppose, and maybe trying to be a little covert about it. But if you stop to think about it, she's definitely saying something about the Republican states and red states, if you will, the United States. You would sort of expect that behavior, in a red state. If you're an attractive woman, that you're going to be, hit on and treated in a derogatory manner in that part of the United States. So
Yeah.
whether that's accurate or not, it certainly seems to be, because it's been clear that that's where this has been taken place in the
I
American
get the
South.
impression that And this is a compliment to the writing. I think you're a little bit more forgiving of maybe the of Poison Ivy than I am here, only
Well,
because she's
I wasn't at first. I wasn't at first until I found out. Okay, she's dying. Like I don't agree with her actions, but I understand why she's making the choices she is.
yeah, yeah.
She's dying.
Yeah,
She's
well,
you know.
yeah, no, fair enough. But she's not. She's even if she wasn't dying, she'd still be killing. I never got the impression that she's killing. I mean, she's still hardcore lethal, and frankly, that's the way I like my Poison Ivy. Okay, so I like that. What I find interesting here is that J. Willow Wilson is trying to sort of ride a balance here between almost suggesting, well, planting little seeds that, well, yeah, but she's not that bad. Well, no, she's that bad. She betrays Harley. She's got no sense of loyalty. She kills. And I'm thinking like, well, and so I'm not as forgiving as you to let that slide or let that slide. She's a villain, and I'm not supposed to let it slide. I view this as she's not a sympathetic villain to me. She's a murderer. She has a choice. She sleeps with someone. She who I never even thought of what you said. As a matter of fact, about it brings up some uncomfortable questions. Is this black woman who kissed her, was she sort of like attracted to her because of the pixel dust that comes off Ivy's body? I don't know, but I mean, it kind of makes you wonder. It's like, and I think, well, maybe it might be disturbing, but good. I think that actually makes the character more interesting, and it just goes to show how screwed up the relationship between Harley and Poison Ivy is, as it bloody well should be, because they're two psychopaths. And so I kind of like this. So I kind of like even the way we're talking about it, because it's like, I'm sort of uncomfortable and on edge with Poison Ivy, and that's kind of the way I like it.
Yeah, again, it's an interesting take. And like I said from the beginning, we we both were sort of shocked when this first issue of this came out, just how brutal Ivy was. She's certainly, like you said, pulling no punches. So I guess we'll see how it all wraps up. If she ends up, deciding that she made a mistake, or how does she reconcile with Harley after this? And it's a lot of those same questions about like Jean Grey. Why
Yeah.
Marvel decided they had to kill her, because there has to be consequences for those actions. Marvel or DC hasn't seemed to really know what to do with Ivy in recent years. Everybody wants her to be with Harley, and does that work? Yeah, again, I think she works better as just out and out villain. That's certainly what she's been in this series, but I don't know how you reconcile that with who Harley is now. Which, let's face it, Harley's a hero these days.
Yeah.
Again, we can debate whether or not that was a good choice. I feel like it was a monetary choice for DC.
Yeah.
Um, so whether or not that's great story wise, how she can be with Poison Ivy after the choices Pamela's made here, I guess remains to be seen. So, all right, last book we're going to talk about is Dear Detective. This is from Lee Bermejo, the letter art by Jared Fletcher. This is a very interesting book, if you will. Everybody talking about all these variant covers making money left and right, propping up the industry. Now DC's taken it one step further, where we get a book that's supposed to be more of a traditional comic book, but it's nothing but covers inside. So there's some great covers to this by Lee Bermejo. So there's the main cover that also has a foil variant that's a 1 in 50, and then there's a 1 in 25 cover where Batman's crouching on this fire escape with a neon sign next to him. But then inside, interspersed with these text pieces, are just a bunch of covers from variant covers from Lee Bermejo that were recently used for his run on Detective Comics when he was the variant cover artist. So when I first heard about this, I was like, okay, Lee Bermejo's doing a Batman book and it's called Dear Detective. I was excited. I'm a big Lee Bermejo fan. Lee's a great guy. I'm a huge fan of his art. And then when I looked at it closer, I'm like, wait, this is just a collection of his covers. Okay, I have his art book. I wouldn't have all these covers, but nice to have them all together in one comic. But then I was like, wait, they're trying to actually turn it into a story. And I looked at it a few weeks ago. I didn't take the time to actually read all the text pieces, and it kind of bugged me. It's like, what is this? It's kind of a mess. Like, what's going on? So my initial reaction was a little bit negative in terms of trying to take a bunch of covers and turn it into a story. But I took the time to read it this last weekend in preparation for this episode, and I gotta say that I've done a complete 180. This works on such a fantastic level that I found myself wondering if this was something Lee had planned all along with these covers. So the covers for these Detective Comics issues, they're not in any sort of particular order in relation to the way they came out on the covers of the individual issues of Detective Comics. But when they're put in this order in this book, they definitely tell a story, which I think is just fantastic because there is some element of storytelling when you're doing a singular image. And I talk to cover artists about this all the time. What are you trying to capture? In concept, when you're in that concept phase of, they just say, hey, draw a cover. How do you plan it out? What are you thinking? I almost had to think, was this something that Lee had in the back of his mind all along? Because when you put these covers in this particular order, it works so well. And then there is this added mystery in these text pieces because there are various times in the text pieces where letters of the alphabet are replaced by symbols, which, it reminds me of like the Zodiac messages, if anybody's familiar with the Zodiac killer and the cryptograms and ciphers and whatnot that he sent to the police and to the local newspaper. So it's kind of along those lines. And these text pieces are a criminal villain talking directly to Batman, and we're reading it as Batman would read it. And so with these symbols, there's obviously this mystery of trying to figure out who the big bad is that's behind this, and they're very kind of cryptic and vague messages. And once you get to the end, it's pretty easy to figure out who the villain is. I'm not going to say who it is, even though we do spoilers, because I think you should go figure it out for yourself. But when you find out who the villain is, it then adds even more weight to these images and to this overall kind of narrative that Bermejo has managed to create by putting these covers in this particular order. So I thought this was really cool. I wouldn't want to see DC do this all the time, but this really worked for me. And especially, it was a little bit surprising because, again, my first reaction was a little bit negative. As much as I love the Bermejo art, I felt like, well, this is just sort of a money grab. Just it doesn't, it's not additive, other than, hey, yeah, I get all these awesome covers and this great art in one book. It didn't feel like much more beyond that. It felt a little pretentious with these text pieces. But when I took the time to actually read the text pieces and decode everything, I ended up really enjoying it. I was like, wow, that was pretty damn cool and pretty awesome. So what were your thoughts? What'd you think?
I agree with you, and I'm just going to go one step further and say, what a fantastic idea for other cover artists to do. If you've got a long streak, especially for to be blunt about it, I would love Adam Hughes. The next time Adam Hughes has a string of covers for Black Widow or Wonder Woman or whatever, pick your character. I would love if there was a theme or a through line, a narrative through line for the various covers, because one of my pet peeves when it comes to covers, generally speaking, and lots of people have this, I'm not alone, but I don't like when covers are disconnected from the story. I'm old school. I like to have some thematic relationship between the content on a cover versus the story itself. And a lot of the Lee Bermejo covers, they're beautiful, gorgeous covers, but they got nothing to do with the content of the comic. And to find out that, well, it's because they're telling their own story. Well, that's pretty cool. And to actually put them in a comic book, I like that. It's actually thinking outside the box a little bit. So I mean, so even if you do disagree, and well, you can disagree with me and say, well, I don't care if covers have nothing to do with the insides. I just want great art. Okay, fine. But to me, it's a bonus. It's a welcome bonus that, hey, not only are we getting these great covers, but we're actually getting a story. If you get all of them, and it's just a really good idea, and I agree with you. When I first saw this, I thought it was a little bit self pretentious. Like, oh, what is this nonsense? All this writing, and I like you. This is the one that I actually did read because it's easy to read. It's a nice easy read, and there's something really nice about having all the words on one page, and then the next page is this gorgeous art, and it sort of reinforces a cinematic feel to it. and it works. It worked really well, and so yeah, I can't believe I'm saying this because, but I'll probably end up buying this. I don't know if it's going to be a hardcover or I don't. Do you know? Is this just a paper soft cover mega? Is this going to be?
I
Do you know?
think, I mean, it is. I gotta think it's some sort of prestige type format because it is. I think it's like $8. It's like $7.99.
Yeah,
So I can't imagine it's just like a regular comic. It's got to be, more than that. But yeah, the I really would like to get that 1 in 25 cover. And I'm curious what the foil of the regular cover looks like as well. But that's a 1 in 50. That might be a
yeah.
little more than
Well,
I
j-
than I
just think if
spend.
you're a just think if you're a Lee Bermejo fan, how now you have an extra incentive to go and buy all these covers.
I know.
Because it's
I know.
hard
I'm a
to,
huge Yeah. I'm a huge Bermejo fan. I have all these. Like I always buy all the covers that he does. And I mean, it's not a big deal when he's on a series that I already buy physically. What I don't necessarily like is when he goes on to something like a Harley Quinn. I don't, I'm not usually buying Harley Quinn, uh, but I'll go buy Harley Quinn if he's doing the cover. So I already collect detectives, so that wasn't a big deal. But yeah, I'm buying these again because I think it works really well. So I haven't actually seen what it looks like, but yeah, it is $7.99, so it must be some prestige type format. So we'll see.
yeah.
All right, well that does it for the individual books that are coming out this week. We do have a few collections: Action Comics Volume 2, The Arena trade paperback, which I don't think has the War World one shot. It just collects Action Comics 1036 through 1041, so leading up to the War World Apocalypse. Um, that concludes that story, and then we have Batman Urban Legends Volume 3 trade paperback. We have Punchline: The Trial of Alexis K hardcover, which collects the backups that were in the Joker, which I don't know that Rocky or I could recommend.
No.
Robin's Being Robin trade paperback. That's the Tim Seeley story. It ended up being pretty solid story. That's the one that won the first DC round robin. No, that was a pure coincidence that Robins won the first round robin. And then Nubia and the Amazons has a hardcover that comes out, which collects that 4 issue series that we just finished talking about tonight. So as far
So
as the comic source goes, I did mention that we do have an interview coming up with Colin Kelly and Jackson Lansing this week. And then Spawn Daily has returned on YouTube and will return with audio only episodes as well later this week. So, um,
yeah.
and also we Rocky and I will have our monthly Best Jacket Spotlight coming up later this week to talk about all the August ish issues, I guess we'll say, of Best Jacket, because actually the second issue of Dudley Dotson actually comes out today as you're listening to this, September 6th. But all the rest of the Best Jacket stuff for August came out obviously in August. So we'll talk about all those later this week. Anything you want to tease, Rock?
Well, we'll be reviewing the Best Jacket Snyder comics as well, and then usually every Sunday night we skipped it this week, but I review some indie comics with Jim at Word Science DC, so I do that as well. So, but before we go, I just want to. What's the pick of the week? What's your pick of the week this week,
Yeah,
Nancy?
I'm just pulling up all the regular issues in front of me to see if I can figure out. It's a tough choice, because both Dark Crisis and Flashpoint Beyond seem to be wanting to roll back that idea of the omniverse. So it's really tough. I could go for either of those. Um, I mean, the Dark Detective we just talked about is amazing as well. So a lot of good books this week, but ultimately, I think I'm gonna have to go with. Oh man, I I'm gonna have to go with Dark Crisis, and what puts it over the top for me is the Daniel Sampere art.
Yeah. Well, that's a good choice. It's to me, it's down to two, Dark Crisis and Flashpoint Beyond for me. I give it to Flashpoint Beyond only because I thought we got some interesting revelations there, and but they're both really good. So actually, and Batman, I really enjoyed Batman as well, but I'd go Flashpoint Beyond. So all right, we got yeah,
We
we
covered all the bases.
covered everything. Yeah. All right.
Yep, that's going to do it, everybody. We appreciate you joining as always. Don't forget to head over to YouTube if you listen to the audio only. Do a search for Rocky's channel and subscribe, like, leave comments, all that stuff. The name of the channel is Comic Space Boom! Exclamation point. So just do a quick search. Conversely, if you check us out on YouTube all the time and you're not subscribed to the Comic Source, just go to wherever you get your podcast, do a search for the Comic Source and subscribe. We appreciate the support, and that way you don't miss out on any of our content. So that's going to do it for this episode. Thanks for joining us as always, and we'll talk to you next time.
See you later.